I still remember the exact moment my stomach dropped. It was a quiet Thursday evening. Nothing dramatic. No storm clouds outside. Just the clinking of silverware and the hum of the kitchen fan. I was folding napkins at the dinner table, helping my wife Adeline get ready for what I believed was her brother Mason's wedding the next day. I had ironed my shirt earlier that afternoon. Even polished the old shoes I only wear to events that require smiling through small talk. "You excited for tomorrow?" I asked, gently tucking a napkin into a rose shape. Adeline blinked, almost like she didn't understand what I was talking about. Then she tilted her head slightly, narrowed her eyes at me as if I had just suggested the sky was green, and replied in the flattest voice I've ever heard from her. "It was last week." At first, I thought she was joking. I waited for the smirk, the sarcastic jab she always followed her pranks with. But nothing came. She reached for her phone, tapped her screen a few times, and handed it to me without a word. There it was. Proof. Mason and his bride, Lucy, standing under a wooden arch decorated with white roses and soft string lights. Guests gathered by the lake, raising glasses. There was Mason's best man, her cousin Jace, wiping tears from his eyes. The photographer had done a great job capturing everything. And then there was Adeline, my wife, in a deep emerald dress I'd never seen before. Hair curled, makeup perfect, smiling like she belonged there. Because she did. Everyone did. Except me. I kept flipping through the pictures, searching for a glimpse of myself. Maybe a corner of my jacket in the background. Maybe I'd forgotten I was there. Maybe they were testing me for some reason I didn't understand. But I wasn't in a single one. I set the phone down slowly. My throat felt dry. I looked at her, still waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, anything human. She just went back to folding napkins, humming like nothing happened. From the couch, her sister Mira called out, "Didn't we tell you?" She said it casually, like someone mentioning the weather. I turned my head and found her scrolling through her own phone, legs crossed, sipping from a glass of red wine like we were all just sitting through another boring commercial break. Their mother Delphine was beside her. She laughed, a full-bodied, deep laugh that made her shoulders shake. "Oh goodness, I could have sworn we told you," she wheezed, wiping her eyes with a tissue she pulled from her sleeve. No one said sorry. No one even looked concerned. They acted like I was the forgetful one, like it was my fault for not magically appearing at a wedding I was never told about. I stood there, napkin in hand, feeling like the floor had dropped from under me. Everything else faded, the hum of the fan, the clink of the wine glass, even the rising tension in my jaw. It was just me and the realization that I had become a stranger in my own house. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. And it hit loud and clear. I didn't matter to them. Not enough to be told. Not enough to be missed. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. I just quietly picked up the plates from the table and started placing them in the sink. My hands moved automatically, scrubbing bits of rice and sauce while my mind stayed stuck on that photo, Adeline, smiling beside her brother like nothing in the world could make that moment better. Except maybe my absence. She could have told me. I'd been asking about the wedding for weeks, when it was, what the dress code would be, if I should get a gift for Mason. She always brushed it off, said the plans kept changing, said they were working things out. Lies. All of it. That night, I lay beside her in bed, our backs not touching. She scrolled through her phone until she fell asleep. Meanwhile, I stared at the ceiling, numb. Not sad. Not even angry. Just empty. I replayed the last few months in my mind. How often her family made plans without me. How I was left out of group texts. How they scheduled dinners that must have slipped their minds when I asked. How Mira once made a joke about me being the plus one that got subtracted. How I laughed. I actually laughed. Now I knew better. This wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate. I had been erased. What stung most wasn't even the betrayal. It was the calmness with which they did it. Like it was routine. Like they had done it before. Like I was the only one who hadn't caught on. In the dark, I reached for my phone. I opened the photo again. That emerald dress. That lakeside glow. Adeline smiling without me. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand. And that's when something in me clicked. Not in a loud, vengeful way, but in a cold, quiet whisper deep in my chest. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd keep folding napkins. They had no idea. That night, sleep didn't visit me. Not even a hint of it. I lay still beside Adeline, who had fallen asleep without a shred of guilt on her face. Her breathing was soft and even, like someone who had nothing to worry about in the world. Meanwhile, I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind circling the same question again and again. How long have I been invisible in this family? I turned to my side, quietly picked up my phone, and opened the gallery where I had saved the wedding photos from her screen. I zoomed in on each one, examining faces, body language, laughter. Everyone looked happy. Posed. Included. Except me. I wasn't there, not in any shot, not in any corner of a reflection, not in a stray shadow. Because I wasn't invited. Because they had made sure I wasn't supposed to be. They didn't forget. They excluded. And it wasn't just about missing the wedding. That was just the surface. This ran deeper. Much deeper. I remembered the weeks leading up to that date, how I had helped Mason fix his new house. He'd called me about a cracked pipe under the guest bathroom, and I had called in my usual plumber. When the guy quoted him too high, I offered to cover part of it, quietly, no big scene. I just wired the difference straight to the company. Then there was the fencing issue, the kitchen tiling, the rewiring of the faulty breaker panel. I had been there every step of the way. I had done it all because family helps family. Or so I thought. Now I realized what I had really been. Useful. Not loved. Not included. Just useful. Like an app they open when needed and close the second it's done. As Adeline shifted beside me, I studied her silhouette in the dark. She looked peaceful, like someone who had just hosted a successful event. I wondered if she had smiled while they toasted her brother. I wondered if she had made a speech. Did she mention me? Did she lie and say I was away on business? Or worse, did no one ask about me at all? It made my stomach turn. By 5 a.m., I was up. I moved around the house like a ghost, quiet, invisible, familiar. I made coffee, skipped breakfast, sat at the dining table where we had once shared laughs and plans, and just stared at the empty seat across from me. Then I pulled out my laptop. It wasn't out of revenge, not yet. It was out of clarity. Cold, necessary clarity. I opened my spreadsheets. Line by line, I went through every transaction over the past 2 years. Tens of thousands had gone to Mason's renovation. More to Delphine's house repairs. A few chunks here and there toward Myra's salon launch, though that business barely lasted 3 months before folding, and no one ever mentioned returning what I gave. I never asked. I never kept score. Until now. Because now it mattered. I looked at the pattern, and a terrible realization hit me. I was more involved in their financial life than their emotional one. I wasn't family. I was infrastructure. That morning, Adeline wandered in around 7, wrapped in her robe, yawning and scratching her head. She smiled when she saw me. "Morning," she said, planting a light kiss on my cheek like nothing had happened. "Morning," I replied, my voice so calm it surprised even me. She poured herself coffee and sat opposite me. Then she started scrolling through her phone. I watched her for a moment, trying to picture what it felt like to live without consequence. To break someone's trust and then sit beside them like nothing happened. That took a kind of audacity I couldn't understand. "What are you working on?" she asked without looking up. "Just going over a few numbers," I said. She nodded, uninterested, and moved on. I watched her take slow sips from her cup. That's when I realized something else. She didn't expect me to question anything. Not the wedding. Not the photos. Not even my absence from a day that any decent partner would have been part of. And that's when the quiet started hardening inside me. The kind of quiet that isn't weak. The kind that observes. That calculates. That makes a decision. I didn't confront her. I didn't shout. What good would that do? Her mother would laugh it off. Mira would roll her eyes and say I was being sensitive. Mason would shrug and pretend he had no idea. And Adeline would just blink and say something hollow like, I didn't think it mattered. I had become a ghost in my own marriage. I was present in form but erased from meaning. So, I decided I would play the part. From that day on, I moved differently. I stopped talking during dinner. She didn't seem to notice. I stopped suggesting family plans. She didn't seem to care. When her mother called and left her phone on speaker, I just listened. I took in the way Delphine referred to me like an outsider. What does he think about that? Is he going to pay for it? Tell him we'll call when we need him. They spoke about me like I wasn't in the room. So I became exactly what they treated me as, unseen. But inside, I was wide awake. I didn't know what I was planning yet. All I knew was something had shifted. Something permanent. And it wasn't about anger. It was about awareness. They had counted on me being dependable, quiet, forgiving, predictable. But that chapter had ended. They just didn't know it yet. It was a sunny Sunday when I made the mistake of driving past Myra's house. I hadn't been invited. Of course, I hadn't. But something pulled me that way. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the ache of wanting to believe that I was still part of something. Maybe just foolish habit. I don't know. What I do know is that as I slowed near her driveway, the same familiar cars were lined up out front. Myra's red coupe, Delphine's clunky SUV, Mason's new silver sedan. I recognized all of them instantly, like names on a guest list I was never added to. And through the open windows, I heard laughter. Genuine, easy laughter. I sat in my car across the street and just listened. The clinking of dishes, the sound of chairs scooting across the hardwood floor, someone turning up music on a Bluetooth speaker. Bacon. I could smell bacon from my window. I'd cooked it for them before. Mira liked hers crispy. Delphine always scolded me for burning the edges. I used to think that meant she cared. But that morning, sitting there in a car I paid for, parked near a home I helped renovate, something cracked in me. They were celebrating again. Together. And once again, I was the ghost they never spoke of. I stared at the sidewalk for a long time. People passed by walking dogs, pushing strollers. Normal life kept moving while I sat in the middle of it, paralyzed by the truth that had been growing louder with each day. They never considered me family. I was the man who paid. That's it. Myra's husband, Grant, had called me 3 months ago when their hot water heater burst. Said he didn't know who else to call. I had a guy there in an hour. Paid the bill, too, because Grant said he was waiting on a client payment and Mira was stressed. Then there was the new windows at Delphine's house. The old ones had leaks. I'd arranged the contractor and wired the deposit myself. No one thanked me. They acted like it was expected, like breathing. And I let them. I didn't want to admit that. But sitting in that car, watching Myra's front door swing open to reveal trays of food and happy people with wine glasses, I understood what I had become. I wasn't a member of their circle. I was a resource, a backup plan, a wallet that smiled. And they didn't even have the decency to pretend otherwise. I drove off in silence, passing by familiar streets, landmarks that used to make me smile, like the bench Adeline and I once sat on after our first real fight. Now, everything felt hollow. Every corner had a memory that had been edited, bleached of warmth. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I stood in the driveway, hands in my pockets, looking at the house I once thought of as ours. But even it had started to feel borrowed, temporary, like the key in my hand unlocked something I no longer had a place in. I walked through the door quietly. The living room was empty. A pile of shopping bags sat near the stairs. Adeline must have gone out with Mira the day before, probably shopping for Mason's housewarming or something equally meaningless. I didn't ask. I didn't want to give her the opportunity to lie. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, went into the study, and called Theo. Theo and I had been friends since college. He was a lawyer now. Sharp, precise, and more loyal than anyone I'd ever met. He'd been the best man at my wedding, though no one from Adeline's side ever really warmed up to him. Too blunt, they said. Too serious. But I'd take blunt over fake any day. Long time, he said when he picked up. Everything all right? No, I said. But it will be. He didn't press. Just waited. I told him everything. About the wedding. The laughter. The photos. About sitting outside Myra's brunch like an idiot hoping someone might call. I told him about the money, the repairs, the family that had silently cut me out while still dipping into my pockets like it was tradition. There was a long pause on his end. Then he asked, "You want out?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the window beside me, watching a squirrel run along the fence line. "No," I said finally. "I want silence." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You don't want to confront them?" I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. They don't deserve confrontation. They'll spin it, laugh it off, twist my words. I just want silence. Clean, cold silence. I can do that, he said. But silence is a powerful tool. Once you go that route, you can't shout later. I don't want to shout, I replied. I want to vanish. But I want them to feel it. Theo exhaled. All right, let's get to work then. We discussed accounts, transfers, and how to quietly untangle myself from every financial thread connecting me to the Andersons. I'd kept everything in my name or my holding company, but I'd never enforced boundaries. That was about to change. We drafted the first set of documents that night. And when I hung up, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt something better. Clarity. I walked back into the living room and found Adeline on the couch, phone in hand, laughing softly at something Mira must have sent. She looked up and smiled. "You okay?" she asked, like nothing had changed. I nodded. Then I looked at her and saw a woman who believed I would always be here. A man who would always pay, always support, always stay. And in that moment, I finally understood. They didn't erase me because they hated me. They erased me because they thought I would never leave. The following Monday, Theo and I met over breakfast at a quiet little diner outside the city. It was the kind of place where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. I didn't want to meet in a law office or a boardroom. I didn't want this to feel like a war, just like a decision. A correction. Theo brought a folder with him. Inside were the documents I needed to sever the quiet chains I had spent years wrapping around myself. He slid the folder across the table with his usual no-nonsense expression. "It's all here," he said, tapping the cover. "Renovation payouts, property maintenance grants, discretionary contributions, every last one of them routed through your personal holding firm. You've been a generous man." I opened it and skimmed the pages. Contracts, authorizations, amendments I had signed without thinking twice, because family needed help, because I believed helping them made me part of something. "I want it all paused," I said quietly. "Every cent, every automatic payment. I don't want a single light bulb changed unless they call me personally." Theo nodded. "I'll get the order signed today, and I've set up alerts in case they try to go around you." I sipped my coffee slowly, thinking of the look that would cross Delphine's face when the plumber said payment never came. The confusion in Myra's voice when the contractor refused to continue fixing the patio. The moment Adeline would try to spin it into another technical mix-up. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk in the study and began removing myself from every informal tie I had to them. I called the gardener who maintained Delphine's lawn and told him not to expect next month's payment. I emailed the property insurance rep and revoked the coverage extension I'd added for Myra's leaking ceiling. I didn't explain. I didn't make excuses. Just a line here, a cancellation there, silent redirection. And then I waited. It took 5 days. On the 6th morning, I was having coffee on the porch when my phone buzzed. Delphine's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, let it ring until the final chime, and then picked up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't curious. I just wanted to hear how she would spin it. "Hello," I said, as calmly as if she were an old co-worker calling to check in. "Oh, thank God," she sighed, in that over-the-top voice of hers. "Darling, I just got off the phone with that terrible builder. He said the kitchen work's been stopped? Something about funds not going through." I said nothing. I told him that must be a mistake, of course. "I mean, you've always handled these things. Is it a bank issue?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wind chimes Adeline had bought 2 summers ago. They clinked softly in the breeze like they were mocking her mother's voice. "No mistake," I said plainly. A beat of silence on the other end. I'm sorry," she said. I gave a quiet chuckle and replied, "Didn't I tell you?" "What?" I repeated it slowly, gently, with the same emptiness her daughter had once offered me across our kitchen table. "Didn't I tell you?" She paused. I could hear her trying to decide whether to laugh again, whether this was some odd joke she didn't quite get yet. But I didn't wait for her to find footing. "I'll let you sort it out with Mason. Or Mira. I'm sure they've got it handled." Then I ended the call. It wasn't slamming a door. It was turning off a light. Later that day, Mira texted me. Just 2 words. "Payment issue?" I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out the folder labeled Anderson Affairs. Yes, I had finally started naming things properly. I placed their folder beside others, business accounts, real estate ventures, trusts. I looked at them all and realized something stunning. Every person in that family had benefited from me. Everyone. And not once did they treat me like I belonged. For dinner that night, Adeline made pasta. I could hear her humming while she stirred in the kitchen. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't mention the calls. She didn't seem to know her mother had been cut off or that Mira was now pacing an H. She asked about the weekend. I said I'd be working. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The next evening, I came home to find her mother and sister sitting in the living room. Delphine stood the moment I entered, like a politician pretending to welcome an old ally. "Oh good, you're home," she said, her voice strained with something she didn't know how to hide. Fear? Confusion? Entitlement? All of it. Maybe. Mira gave me a small wave. "We thought we'd come talk in person. Sort things out." I didn't sit. I walked to the hallway table, pulled out the envelope I had prepared earlier, and handed it to Delphine. She opened it right there. Inside was a packet of itemized receipts, contractor logs, maintenance records, everything I had paid for over the past 3 years. Every leak, every wall, every nail. This, I said, is what humor used to cost me. Her eyes darted across the pages, realization dawning like thunder. I didn't keep score before, I continued, because I believed I was part of this family. I thought love was a shared thing, but it turns out it was just a tab I didn't know I'd opened. Delphine tried to speak. I didn't let her. And now the account is closed. I turned and left the room, walked straight upstairs, and shut the door behind me. I didn't hear them leave. I didn't care. For the first time in years, the house was finally quiet. Not empty. Not tense. Just quiet. And I liked it. Adeline tried to act like nothing had happened, as if her mother and sister hadn't just sat in our living room, clutching receipts like they'd never seen accountability before, as if I hadn't just laid out the truth in black and white. She cooked dinner that night, lemon chicken with roasted potatoes. That was her peace offering meal, the one she used when she sensed tension she didn't want to talk about. But I wasn't hungry. Not for food. Not for another round of emotional amnesia. "You've barely touched your plate," she said, cutting into her chicken. "I'm not hungry," I answered without looking up. She put her fork down. "You could have told me you were cutting off the payments. You could have told me about your brother's wedding," I said quietly, still not looking at her. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I saw it from the corner of my eye. That moment when someone considers whether lying is still worth it. But for once, she didn't deny it. She just sighed, picked up her glass of wine, and drank. "It was a misunderstanding," she murmured after a while. "It wasn't malicious. You're reading into it too much." I turned to her. "A misunderstanding is forgetting to grab milk on the way home, not erasing your husband from your brother's wedding." She flinched, and for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, there was something close to shame in her face. But it passed quickly, replaced by that calm, practiced indifference. "You're being dramatic." There it was. The words didn't sting. Not anymore. I'd already bled dry. Now I was just walking through the ashes. "I'm moving into the guest room," I said calmly. "Starting tonight." Adeline didn't react immediately. She just stared at me like I had said I was changing the curtains. "Seriously?" she said after a moment. "You're going to sulk around the house like some ghost?" I stood up, picked up my half-full plate, and walked it to the sink. "No. I'm going to live like someone who's finally woken up." That night, I moved my clothes downstairs. The guest room was small, but it was mine. I changed the bed sheets, cleaned out the drawers, and for the first time in months, slept without the weight of pretending. The days after that were quiet. Not in the peaceful sense. More like the quiet of a battlefield after the smoke clears and everyone's waiting to see who moves first. I kept to myself. Cooked my own meals. Did my own laundry. When Adeline left for work, she stopped announcing it. When she came home, she'd glance at the guest room door like it offended her by existing. I didn't care. I was no longer interested in making her comfortable with what she had done. A week passed before she tried to press reset. One evening, I heard the clinking of glasses and the sound of her voice calling out to her mother. Apparently, they were coming over again, this time to talk things out over wine and dessert. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten to leave. I just stayed in my room, listened. Delphine opened with a joke, of course. Something dry and layered with condescension. "I always knew you had a dramatic side," she said through laughter. "You should have been in theater. Maybe then you'd be too busy to cut off our roof repairs." Adeline laughed with her. Mira joined in from the kitchen, chiming something about how I must be going through a midlife ego crisis. I walked out of the guest room, slow and quiet, and stepped into the hallway. None of them saw me at first. Then Delphine turned, smile still plastered on her face, until she saw what I was holding. An envelope. Another one. She rolled her eyes, still playing the role of the amused matriarch. "Is this another bill breakdown, sweetheart?" "No," I said. "This one's on the house." I walked to the coffee table and placed it down between the wine glasses. Inside were not receipts this time, but copies of emails. Screenshots of text messages. Correspondence between contractors I had paid and her family requesting extras, spa-like upgrades, fancy lighting, unnecessary additions that ballooned costs because, in Myra's words, he's good for it. "This," I said evenly, "is what entitlement looks like in writing." The laughter stopped. Even Mira stopped stirring her drink. Delphine opened the envelope, pulled out the pages, and went silent. I looked at Adeline. She was frozen. her hand still holding a spoon over the dessert bowl, unmoving. "I didn't come out here to argue," I said. "I didn't come to reclaim anything. I came to remind you that I was never invisible. You just chose to look past me." Then I turned and walked back to my room. Left them in their designer clothes, surrounded by half-eaten tiramisu and sour wine. They didn't follow. Later that night, I heard them leave, doors closing harder than necessary, tires screeching down the street. Adeline didn't come to the guest room. She stayed upstairs, maybe crying, maybe stewing. I didn't check. I didn't care. Something strange happened after that night. I began to feel lighter, not happier, not yet, but freer. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. I started working out again, waking up early, reading books I'd left gathering dust on the shelf. My mind felt clearer without the emotional weight of constantly waiting for validation. Then one day, I got an email from a contractor I hadn't heard from in months. Someone Delphine had referred for Myra's second renovation attempt. "Hey, just confirming. They said you'd be covering the new tile job too?" I replied with 2 words. "Not involved." Silence. Sweet silence. From that point on, I stopped bracing myself for the next manipulation, the next insult dressed as a joke, the next request laced in fake warmth. I knew what I was now. I was no longer the man who pays but isn't family. I was the man who remembers everything and forgets nothing. I left the house before sunrise. Not out of anger. Not to make a scene. Just a quiet decision after too many days of watching my own reflection fade in a home I no longer recognized. I had packed a small duffel bag the night before. A few shirts, a laptop, my documents, and the spare keys to a condo I'd bought 5 years earlier, back when I still believed in the concept of future-proofing my life. The condo sat on the 9th floor of a high-rise on the quiet side of the city. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the skyline, and the one thing I hadn't realized I missed until I opened the door, space to breathe. The silence there was different. Not the tense kind that sat between 2 people in a house that had grown too big with emotional distance. No, this silence was clean. It was mine. I dropped my bag, exhaled, and let the weight of months fall off my shoulders all at once. For the first time in years, I was alone with my thoughts, and they weren't screaming. Adeline didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. Maybe she assumed it was another phase. A silent protest that would end with me crawling back to her side like I always had. Or maybe she simply didn't notice. I wasn't sure which truth hurt more. 3 days passed before my phone buzzed. It was Mira. "We need help finishing the foundation work at Mom's place. You know she's getting older. This delay is stressing her out." No. "Hi." No. "How are you?" No acknowledgement of the last conversation. Just another request. Another assumption. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then tapped the call button. She answered on the second ring, as chipper as ever. "I knew you'd call back," she said with a smug little laugh. "Seriously, though, the builder is being difficult. He says without a new deposit, he won't finish." "I'm sure Mason can handle it," I interrupted calmly. There was a pause. "Mason?" she asked. "But he had a lovely wedding," I continued. "Didn't he?" She didn't speak. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel what I had been feeling for months. That tight, sinking quiet when someone forgets you on purpose. When they leave you behind and pretend it was an accident. The line clicked. She had hung up. I smiled. Not a cruel smile. Just one of realization. The thing about silence is that once you stop filling it for other people, it becomes a weapon they don't know how to defend against. They're used to your yes, your convenience, your explanations. When those disappear, so does their control. Days passed. No more calls from Mira. No text from Delphine. Not a single word from Adeline. And for once, I didn't wait by the phone. Instead, I worked. I set up my desk near the window. I opened projects I'd been meaning to start for years. I cleaned out my inbox. Caught up with old clients. I even reached out to a few nonprofits that had been sitting on my radar. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about living in my own name again. I cooked my own meals, played jazz in the mornings, and sometimes just sat in silence, staring at the skyline, thinking about nothing in particular. That to me was the greatest shift. I wasn't constantly rehearsing arguments in my head anymore. I wasn't defending myself to ghosts. One afternoon, I walked to the cafe down the street. A new barista named Jen took my order. She smiled when I told her my name, scribbled it on the cup, and said, "Nice to see a regular face." Most folks around here just glare at their phones. Trying not to be one of them anymore, I said. She grinned. Good luck. That night, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. But it didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like peace. And just when I thought they'd finally decided to leave me be, Delphine called again. This time, her voice was different. Edgy. Forced calm wrapped in panic. The roof is leaking, she said without preamble. The builder is threatening legal action. What is going on? I looked out my window at the city lights and sipped from my mug before responding. I'm sure Mason or Adeline can help, I said, mirroring her own dismissiveness. They said it was your responsibility, she snapped. And there it was. The truth they'd never admit openly. I had been the backbone of their comfort. The unspoken agreement was that I would pay, fix, provide, protect, and ask for nothing in return. Didn't I tell you? I said softly. What? I let the words sit. Let her feel the same chill I'd felt when her daughter showed me wedding photos I didn't know existed. Let her choke on the same emptiness I'd swallowed for years. Didn't I tell you? I repeated, and then ended the call. An hour later, Adeline finally broke the silence. She didn't call. She came. I heard the knock at my condo door around 9:15 p.m. When I opened it, she stood there in a coat too thin for the cold and eyes red like she hadn't slept. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. I stepped aside but didn't say a word. She walked in slowly, looking around like she was seeing me for the first time in years. This place is nice, she said, voice small. I nodded. She sat down on the edge of the couch, twisting her hands together. This is your family too, she said, barely above a whisper. You can't just leave them like this. No, I said, standing near the window. Family doesn't erase you from photos, or celebrations, or homes. She looked down at her hands. I made a mistake, she said. I didn't think it would matter. That hurt more than anything. You didn't think it would matter. I didn't reply. She looked up. Can we talk? I let the silence answer. And for the first time, she sat in it. No defenses. No jokes. Just her, staring at a version of me she hadn't met before. The one who wouldn't carry shame that didn't belong to him. When she finally stood up to leave, she turned to me. Do you still love me? I looked at her, long and steady. I love who I used to be when I was with you, but I don't miss who I became. She nodded, eyes welling up, and left without another word. And I returned to my silence. Not because I was broken, but because I was finally whole. When people underestimate you long enough, you stop correcting them. You let them believe what they want. That's what I did. For years, the Andersons treated me like I was just an IT consultant, just another tech guy who got lucky marrying into their family. They never asked deeper questions about what I did, how I built my business, or why I never seemed to stress about money. They weren't interested in my world, just in what I could offer theirs. That suited me fine, because the less they knew, the more control I had. They didn't know I owned the consulting firm I worked at. They didn't know I'd purchased rental properties across the city through a holding company with a generic name they'd never recognize. They didn't know that half the people they gossiped about at brunch, landlords, HOA board members, building inspectors, had my number saved in their phones. And they had no idea that Delphine's beloved house, the same one I helped save from foreclosure 5 years ago, was still tied to a lien I held quietly, legally, and indisputably. Back then, Mason had gotten himself into some gambling trouble. He asked his mother for help. She, in turn, asked me. The house was at risk, and they needed a co-signer to keep the second mortgage from collapsing. I didn't ask questions. I just signed. Of course, I made sure the paperwork protected me. A quiet clause in the agreement allowed me to convert the lien into an enforceable debt if certain conditions weren't met. They weren't, not by a long shot. And now, as I sat in my condo, watching the evening traffic drift like ants below, I realized I was holding something far more powerful than anger, leverage. Theo came over that night. He had a thick folder with him, updated LLC records, new legal notices, and a summary of every transaction we were moving under private control. This one, he said, pointing to the page with Delphine's property, is your ace. The city inspector's report is enough to trigger the debt clause. If you wanted, we could move to seize her equity within 30 days. I didn't smile. Not out of restraint, but because there was nothing to gloat about. I don't want the house, I said. Theo raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? I want them to feel it, I said quietly. I want them to know what it's like to live with the sound of a door closing in their face. He nodded. He understood. We finalized the documents. My ownership's now public. My involvement, now official. All renovations routed through my firms, canceled. All scheduled maintenance plans revoked. They'd have to go through new inspections, new estimates, with contractors who didn't know them, and certainly didn't care about their last name. The Anderson family facade, polished smiles, borrowed charm, whispered judgments, was beginning to show its cracks. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't announce anything. I just let the systems do what they were designed to do. A week later, I got an email from a property manager, confirming cancellation of the upcoming roofing work for Ms. Anderson's residence. Client unable to verify authorized payment source. A day after that, Myra's name popped up on my phone. I let it ring out. Then she sent a voice note. You really think this is funny? Mom's stressed out of her mind. The new contractors are asking for upfront deposits we can't cover yet. You know how long it takes to get approved for a new loan? You're making this harder than it needs to be. I played the message twice. Not because I was unsure of her tone. I just wanted to hear how deeply she believed I still belonged to their service. A few hours later, Mason texted. Not sure what's going on with Mom's house. Can we talk? I didn't reply. That night, I received a message from someone I didn't expect, Lucy, Mason's wife. We'd never been particularly close. She was always pleasant, always neutral. I used to think it was because she was shy. Now, I realized she was just observant. She hadn't joined the laughter when I was erased from Mason's wedding. In fact, I barely saw her in the photos that Adeline showed me. Her message was short. I'm sorry. I didn't know. If I had, I wouldn't have gone through with it the same way. You deserved better. I read it twice, then locked my phone. The next day, I stopped by one of the properties I owned in the Eastwood district. It was an apartment complex with 12 units and a management team that answered directly to me. I stood in the courtyard for a while, listening to the sound of kids playing nearby, watching tenants go about their evening routines. It reminded me of how much I'd built quietly, carefully. While everyone else was busy judging appearances, I was investing, protecting, preparing. I remembered a night years ago when Delphine had joked that I wasn't ambitious like Mason, that my job was cute but not impressive. I had laughed then, shrugged it off. But now, as I stood on the balcony of my own building, I realized I wasn't the quiet one. They were the blind ones. And their ignorance had been the greatest gift they ever gave me. A few days later, Theo called. They got the letter, he said. Delphine's hired a new attorney. She's panicking, trying to renegotiate terms on the lien. And she can't. You gave them 5 years of goodwill. You're within your rights. I exhaled. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was just done. And being done is one of the most powerful feelings in the world. I ended the call and looked around my condo. The light was soft through the windows. The air was clean. My inbox was quiet. My conscience, even quieter. They could keep their laughter, their brunches, their weddings. I had my name. I had my voice. And finally, I had my peace. It happened faster than I expected. The unraveling, the chaos, the slow public exposure of everything they tried to keep wrapped in artificial grace. It started with a voicemail from Delphine, shaky, out of breath, and no longer laced with superiority. I need you to call me back. Please. The new builder's threatening legal action. Says we defaulted on the revised contract. I didn't even know there was a new contract. They said it was under your name. She sounded like a woman who had lost control of the narrative. And for the first time, I didn't. I never called her back. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed to protect myself from becoming their crutch again. That same day, I got a text from Adeline. It was long. Too long. I didn't even read it all the way through. Just skimmed over phrases like, I didn't know it would get this bad, and there's still family, and we shouldn't let money destroy everything. Money didn't destroy anything. Silence did. Entitlement did. The belief that I would never push back did. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by my window. Below, the city moved on without any awareness of the storm circling the Anderson name. The same people who once laughed behind my back were now realizing that they had built their comfort on foundations they didn't own. A few days later, Adeline showed up again. She didn't text, didn't call, just knocked. I saw her through the peephole, hair tied back, no makeup, wearing the navy blue sweater I'd bought her 3 birthdays ago. I opened the door slowly. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just looked at me, eyes searching. Can I come in? She asked. I let her. She sat on the edge of the couch like she had during her first visit. Only now her shoulders slumped with something heavier. "We're in trouble," she said. "I know," I replied. She glanced up at me, surprised I wasn't offering comfort. I didn't move to sit beside her. I stayed standing. "They're falling apart. Mom can't refinance the house because of the lien. Myra's business partner backed out. Mason and Lucy are fighting almost every day. It's like everything is just breaking." I nodded, because it was never built properly. She blinked, stunned at my calm. "I didn't come here to beg," she said finally. "I just needed you to know that it's not all jokes and brunches anymore. We're dealing with real things now." "Good," I said. "Real things are overdue." She flinched a little. "You think we deserve this?" "I think consequences are part of adulthood," I answered. "And I think when you leave someone out, repeatedly, cruelly, carelessly, you don't get to act shocked when they stop playing their part." She went quiet again. "I came to ask for dinner," she said finally. "Not a favor. Not money. Just one dinner. Just to talk." I tilted my head, studied her for a second, and then said, "I'll think about it." The next day, I didn't go to work. I took the morning off and drove past Myra's salon. It had a big "For Lease" sign taped on the glass. I parked and stepped out just to get a closer look. The space was empty now. Chairs gone. Reception desk removed. A faded poster of Mira still hung in the corner window, smiling beside a curling iron and the slogan "Confidence starts here." Ironic. I stood there for a moment, then got back into my car. Later that afternoon, I stopped by one of my commercial properties. Theo had arranged a meeting with a new tenant, an up-and-coming design firm looking for office space. I toured them through the building, shook hands, negotiated with a clear mind. It felt good, clean, purposeful. After they left, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Adeline, and 1 voicemail. I hesitated, then hit play. "I know you think I don't care. I know you think I was part of everything that happened, but I wasn't trying to hurt you. I didn't want to rock the boat. I thought it was easier to let things slide. And now everything's capsized, and I get it. Maybe I deserve this. But I do miss you. I miss how you used to take care of everything. I miss who we were before all of this." I deleted the message, not out of spite, but because I didn't want to carry her longing when she had never carried mine. That night, I cooked for myself. Steak, roasted garlic, sautéed vegetables. I set the table, lit a candle, ate slowly, savoring the silence not as punishment, but as presence. My presence. I remembered how many dinners I had spent surrounded by people who looked through me, how many events I had paid for but hadn't been welcomed at, how many laughs were shared at my expense while I smiled politely and poured the wine. Now I was alone, and it was the most peace I'd known in years. The fall of the Anderson family facade wasn't loud. It didn't come with breaking headlines or dramatic public arguments. It came in quiet losses, canceled projects, frozen accounts, failed loans, broken relationships, things they'd taken for granted slowly slipping away. And not once did I have to raise my voice. They unraveled themselves. I just stopped holding the thread. The news came through a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. His name was Ray, and he used to be Mason's co-worker, one of the few decent people in that circle who had eyes, ears, and a conscience. He called one afternoon while I was reviewing lease renewals in my condo office. "You hear what happened with Mason and Lucy?" he asked. "No," I replied, already knowing it wouldn't be good. "They're separated. She moved out last weekend. Took all her stuff and went back to her sister's place. Told everyone at brunch it was because of what happened with you. Said the family's treatment of you made her sick." I blinked, sat back in my chair. "She said that. Word for word," Ray said. "Apparently, she didn't even know about the wedding stuff until someone brought it up at a dinner. When she found out you weren't invited, and the way they laughed about it, she lost it. Said if they could do that to you, they could do it to anyone." I didn't say much after that. Just nodded, thanked him for the call, and hung up. It should have made me feel victorious. It didn't. All I felt was confirmation. Confirmation that I had never imagined the cruelty. That I wasn't overly sensitive. That the quiet way I'd been pushed aside was, in fact, real and visible to others. I went for a walk that evening. The streets were lit with that soft golden hour hue that makes everything look cinematic. People walked their dogs. A couple laughed outside a bakery. Life moved on. My heart felt oddly still. Mira got engaged around that same time. Word spread quickly. She'd posted it all over social media. Close-up shots of the ring. Long captions about love and second chances. But what stood out wasn't the announcement. It was the silence that followed. No one offered to pay for her venue. No one offered to host. Even Delphine, once the queen of arranging events for her children, was suddenly occupied with repairs and contractor disputes. The financial safety net I had quietly provided for over 5 years had vanished, and with it, their image of effortless stability. A week later, Mira called me. I didn't answer. She texted instead. I just want to know if we can be civil. I'd still love to have you at the wedding. You're important to us. I read it. Deleted it. I wasn't angry. Just done. That same night, I received one more message. From Adeline. It wasn't long. I miss how you used to take care of everything. That line hung in my chest longer than I wanted it to. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't accountability. It was nostalgia, selective and convenient. She missed the ease I created, the invisible scaffolding I built around all of them, so they could shine while I faded. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood by the window and looked out at the city again. Every time I did, it reminded me of who I was outside their orbit. A man who could build, protect, think, provide. Not because it was expected, but because it was who I am. They never really knew that man. They only knew the quiet husband, the predictable provider, the man who folded napkins and laughed when they joked at his expense. I was not that man anymore. And strangely, I felt sorry for Adeline. Because she was mourning the wrong thing. She thought she missed me, but what she really missed was control. 2 days later, I got a call from Theo. Thought you'd like to know, he said. Delphine's attorney reached out. She's trying to settle the lien out of court. They're terrified the house will be listed. Let her sweat, I said. Already is. We shared a quiet laugh. Then he said something that caught me off guard. Ever thought about letting go entirely? I paused. What do you mean? I mean the paperwork's done. You're protected. Their access is cut. You've made your point. Do you want to stay tethered to any of it? Or do you want to walk away clean? I didn't answer immediately. That night, I sat alone on my balcony, the air cool and still, and really thought about it. For the first time since this began, I considered what it would feel like to stop not just responding, but remembering. Not just defending, but detaching. To stop letting them rent space in my mind. To let the chapter close, no final paragraph, no dramatic ending. Just a silent page turn. It felt possible. And that was enough. So when I woke the next morning, I called Theo back. Start the process, I said. All of it. All of it. Cut the lien. Finalize the property transfers. Close out anything still tethered to their names or their chaos. Let them live in the world they created, without me. Because that's what they chose. I was just honoring it. It's been almost a year now. A full turn of the calendar since the day I stood in my own kitchen and was told, without hesitation, without apology, that my wife had attended her brother's wedding without me. A year since Mira laughed from the couch and asked, "Didn't we tell you?" while her mother sipped wine like I wasn't standing in the room. A year since I folded napkins with hope in my chest and went to bed with silence in my lungs. And now? Now I live in a home that I chose. Every piece of furniture was handpicked by me, not bought to impress anyone or match someone else's idea of elegance. My mornings start with peace. My nights end without noise. I don't check my phone, bracing for another passive-aggressive text. I don't carry invisible debts for invisible roles in a family that never truly welcomed me. I carry only myself. And that has been enough. The condo, my condo, has become something I didn't know I needed. A refuge, not from the world, but from the version of myself I used to be. The man who explained too much, gave too much, waited too long for people who would never clap when he walked into a room. The silence is no longer a wound. It's a wall I built, brick by brick, to keep out noise I no longer accept. Last week, I hosted dinner. A small one. Nothing extravagant. Just a few people I trust, people who never made me prove my worth. Theo brought wine, of course. He's become more than just my lawyer. He's my anchor in storms I didn't know I was allowed to step out of. My sister, Nadia, flew in from Florida with her boyfriend. She used to worry about me. Now she just hugs me longer and smiles wider. We sat around the table, my table, and passed plates without judgment, without tension, without pretending. It wasn't fancy. No caterers, no floral arrangements, no performance. Just laughter, real stories, and clean plates. Sometime after dessert, Theo leaned back in his chair and asked the question I knew was coming. Do you ever hear from Adeline's family anymore? The room got quiet, not uncomfortably, just curiously. Everyone looked to me like they were waiting for some dramatic revelation. I smiled. Not anymore, I said. I finally got the hint. Laughter followed, warm and knowing. And that was it. The chapter closed with a single sentence. No rage. No revenge. Just a fact. I hadn't blocked any of them. I hadn't sent cruel messages or broadcasted their downfall. I simply stopped showing up where I wasn't seen. Stopped carrying weight for people who would never lift mine. That was my justice. And it was enough. The next morning, I got up early and went for a walk. There's a trail near the condo that leads down to a quiet park by the water. I go there often now when I want to think, when I want to feel grounded. There's a bench I like. From there, I can see the reflection of the city skyline on the lake. The same skyline I used to stare at from my office window during sleepless nights, wondering if I was the problem, wondering if maybe I wasn't trying hard enough to earn a seat at their table. But sitting here now, I understand what I didn't then. It was never about trying harder. It was about realizing I was trying for the wrong people. People who mistook kindness for weakness. People who saw silence as consent. People who believed being family meant being owed. I stayed in that system for so long because I thought loyalty meant endurance. But loyalty without respect is just self-abandonment dressed up in polite manners. And I'm not that man anymore. I've rebuilt my world now. Smaller. Tighter. Built not on obligation, but on mutual presence. No more pretending. No more squinting to find value in people who refuse to offer it freely. Sometimes, I see glimpses of the Andersons in public posts, someone tags Mason in a group photo, or Mira uploads a story about her wedding planning struggles. I scroll past. Not with bitterness. With disinterest. They live in a chapter I've already closed. Adeline? She tried reaching out a few more times. Once through email. Another time through a letter she dropped off at the front desk. I read the first paragraph. That was enough. The rest, I let go unread. She said she missed me. But really, she missed the convenience I offered. The quiet man in the background, solving problems without being seen. That version of me is gone. Buried beneath every unpaid debt. Every inside joke that left me out, every party I funded but was never truly invited to. And what replaced him? A man who smiles when his phone is quiet. A man who eats alone when necessary and never feels alone. A man who hosts dinners around tables he built, chairs he chose, with people who show up without needing to be convinced to care. So if anyone ever asks what happened to me, where I went, why I don't speak, why I never returned, I'll say this. I didn't leave with anger. I left with clarity. And when they finally realized what I carried, I was already gone. For my birthday, my wife left a frozen pizza on the counter and sent a congrats text to me. A week earlier, my wife and her friends threw my best friend a backyard bash with fireworks and a drone photographer. When I asked why, my wife shrugged. You're not really the celebrating type. I didn't reply. I didn't eat. I just grabbed my bag and walked out the door. That night, my wife's MOM texted. Why's everyone freaking out? My name's Miles Carter, and I need you to understand something right off the bat. I'm not the kind of guy who throws tantrums or makes dramatic exits over stupid stuff. I'm reasonable. I'm level-headed. I'm the guy who remembers to bring the potato salad to the barbecue even though nobody asked me to, and everyone's going to eat the store-bought mac and cheese instead. I'm dependable, you know? The human equivalent of a Honda Civic. Reliable, efficient, and apparently so boring that my own wife forgot I existed on my 34th birthday. Let me paint you a picture of how this absolute masterpiece of a day unfolded. I woke up that morning with the kind of cautious optimism that only a married man on his birthday can muster. Like maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Maybe Tara would surprise me with breakfast in bed, or at least remember to say happy birthday before checking her Instagram feed. I'm not asking for a parade here, folks. Just basic human acknowledgement that I'd successfully survived another trip around the sun without getting hit by a bus or developing a gambling addiction. I came downstairs around 8 in the morning, showered and dressed like it was a special occasion, because in my delusional little world, it was. The kitchen was empty. No balloons. No streamers. No cards propped up against the coffee maker with hearts drawn in Sharpie. Just the usual mess from Tara's midnight snack raid. Empty yogurt containers on the counter, a spoon in the sink, and the faint smell of something that might have been cheese but could have also been regret. I checked my phone. Nothing. Not a text, not a call, not even one of those automated birthday messages from my dentist's office reminding me I'm due for a cleaning. I made my own coffee, shocking development, I know, and sat at the kitchen table wondering if maybe she was planning some kind of surprise. Maybe she was waiting until evening. Maybe she'd arranged something thoughtful and sweet, and I was being paranoid. Spoiler alert, I wasn't being paranoid. I was being stupidly hopeful, which is somehow worse. The day crawled by like a three-legged turtle crossing a highway. I worked from home, answered emails, sat through a video conference where my boss Keith asked me to circle back on a project I'd already finished twice. Around noon, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. By 3 o'clock, I was starting to think maybe I'd imagined my own birthday. Maybe I was having some kind of existential crisis where I'd fabricated the entire concept of celebrating the anniversary of my birth. But no, Facebook confirmed it. 17 notifications from people I barely remembered from high school, all wishing me a blessed day, with champagne glass emojis they definitely copy-pasted from last year. At 6:30 in the evening, I heard Tara's car pull into the driveway. My heart did this pathetic little hopeful jump, like a golden retriever hearing the word walk. I stayed in the living room, pretending to read a book I wasn't actually absorbing, waiting for her to come in with a cake, or flowers, or literally anything that suggested she knew what day it was. She walked in carrying grocery bags and her gym duffel. "Hey," she said, not looking at me. Just hey, like I was the mailman or the guy who bags groceries at Kroger. She dumped the bags on the kitchen counter with the enthusiasm of someone taking out the trash, and I heard the telltale sound of frozen food hitting laminate. I waited. I gave her a solid 5 minutes to remember, to suddenly smack her forehead and say, "Oh my God, Miles, I'm so sorry, happy birthday." But instead, she just unpacked the groceries, stuck a few things in the fridge, and left one item sitting on the counter. Then she grabbed her phone and disappeared upstairs. Curiosity, or maybe masochism, got the better of me. I walked into the kitchen, and there it was, folks. The piece de resistance. The grand gesture. The culmination of 10 years of marriage, of frozen pizza. Not even a good frozen pizza, mind you. We're talking bottom shelf, cardboard crust, cheese that might be plastic situation. Still sealed in its plastic wrap. Not preheated. Not even accompanied by a note, or a half-hearted, "I'll cook this later." Just sitting there on the counter like an afterthought from a sitcom where the laugh track died of disappointment years ago. I stared at that pizza for a solid minute, waiting for the punchline. Surely this was a joke. Surely she'd come downstairs any second and say gotcha, and pull out the real surprise. But the only thing that came was a text notification on my phone. From Tara, who was literally upstairs. "Congrats, Miles." 2 words. 14 characters including the comma and period. No emojis. No exclamation point. No happy birthday, or love you, or sorry I'm the worst wife in the continental United States. Just congrats, Miles, like I'd finished a moderately difficult crossword puzzle or successfully parallel parked on the first try. Here's where the story gets really fun, though. See, I'm not the kind of person who forgets details, especially when those details involve public humiliation and financial waste. Exactly 1 week earlier, 7 days before my frozen pizza extravaganza, Tara had thrown my best friend Jordan the birthday party of the century. I'm talking backyard extravaganza with a capital E. She'd rented a tent, hired a catering company that served fancy sliders and truffle fries, set up a champagne fountain that looked like it cost more than my car, and, my personal favorite detail, hired a drone photographer who nearly decapitated Jordan's cousin Greg, trying to get the perfect aerial shot of everyone singing happy birthday. I'd helped set up for that party. I'd strung lights. I'd moved furniture. I'd made 3 trips to the liquor store because apparently 1 bottle of top-shelf vodka wasn't enough for 15 people. And when it was all over, Tara had beamed with pride, posting approximately 47 photos on Instagram with captions like "celebrating this amazing human," and "nothing's too good for the people we love." But when I'd asked her, casually, carefully, trying not to sound like a needy child, why my birthday couldn't maybe have a fraction of that energy, She'd looked at me like I'd suggested we sacrifice a goat in the living room. "You're not really the celebrating type, Miles," she'd said, already scrolling through her phone. "You've always been more low-key." "Oh right. My bad. I forgot that I was supposed to earn affection by providing pyrotechnics and nearly killing people with camera equipment. Silly me for thinking that maybe, just maybe, my own wife might give half a damn about the day I was born." That night, standing in my kitchen staring at that frozen pizza while the house settled into its usual evening silence, something inside me just clicked. Not in an angry way, not even in a sad way. It was more like a switch flipping, a decision making itself without much input from my brain. I walked upstairs, pulled my old duffel bag from the closet, and started packing. Toothbrush, clothes for a few days, laptop charger, the essentials. Tara didn't even look up from her phone when I zipped the bag. "Going somewhere?" she asked, thumbs still flying across the screen. "Yeah," I said. "Somewhere that doesn't smell like freezer burn and broken promises." I walked out of that house without yelling, without slamming doors, without any of the dramatic flourishes you see in movies. Just me, my duffel bag, my dignity, and the haunting sound of an untouched pizza crust cracking somewhere in the kitchen behind me, probably buckling under the weight of its own mediocrity. Best birthday gift I ever gave myself, honestly. The first thing you need to know about checking into a cheap hotel at 9:30 on a Tuesday night with nothing but a duffel bag and the emotional baggage of a failed marriage is that nobody working the front desk is paid enough to care about your drama. And honestly, that's exactly what I needed. I pulled into the parking lot of the Sunset Inn, which, by the way, faced east and hadn't seen a legitimate sunset since probably 1987, and sat in my car for a solid 10 minutes just staring at the neon vacancy sign flickering like it was having its own personal crisis. The place looked like the kind of establishment where you'd find a motivational speaker who'd hit rock bottom or a traveling salesman who'd made some questionable life choices. Perfect. I'd fit right in. The lobby smelled like industrial cleaner and someone's microwave burrito, which somehow felt more honest than my own house ever did. Behind the front desk sat a guy who looked about 22, wearing a name tag that said Brandon in all caps like he was yelling his own identity into existence. He had earbuds in and was clearly watching something on his phone that was way more interesting than my personal breakdown. I dinged the little bell on the counter. You know, one of those brass ones that sounds way more cheerful than any bell has a right to be. And Brandon looked up with the expression of someone who'd just been interrupted during the good part of a video. "Help you?" he asked, pulling out one earbud but leaving the other in, just in case I wasn't worth his full attention. "Yeah, I need a room for the night," I said. "Maybe a few nights, actually. Haven't quite worked out the details of my new living situation yet." Brandon started typing on his ancient desktop computer that probably ran on Windows XP and prayers. "King or two queens? Just a king is fine. I'm flying solo on this adventure." He nodded like he'd seen this exact scenario play out 100 times before. "Credit card." I handed it over, and while he was processing everything, he glanced up at me with this look that was half curiosity, half pity. "Celebrating something?" he asked, and I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic or genuinely couldn't read the room. "Yeah," I said, unable to stop myself from smiling. "My emotional independence." Brandon paused, looked at me for a second, then cracked the smallest grin. "Good for you, man. Room 237. Second floor. Take the stairs to your left. Elevator's broken." "Of course it is," I said, grabbing my key card. "Would have been suspicious if everything worked perfectly." "Ice machine's on your floor," he added. "Also broken. But there's a vending machine that sometimes accepts dollar bills." "You're really selling this place, Brandon." "Hey, it's $89 a night, and we don't ask questions. That's the whole pitch." "Fair enough." I grabbed my duffel bag and headed for the stairs, climbing up to the second floor while trying not to think about how many life decisions had led me to this exact moment. The hallway carpet was that special pattern that hotels use specifically to hide stains. You know the one, where it looks like someone threw a kaleidoscope into a blender and then vomited it onto the floor. Room 237 was at the end of the hall, right next to what I could only assume was either another guest having a very loud phone conversation or someone watching a documentary about angry geese. I slid the key card into the door slot. Red light. Tried again. Red light. Third time's the charm. Green light, and I was in. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a place called the Sunset, and that charged $89 a night. One queen bed with a comforter that had probably witnessed things that would make a crime scene investigator quit their job. A TV from 2003 bolted to the dresser. A bathroom the size of a shoe box with water pressure that could best be described as apologetic. And that smell. That universal hotel smell that's somehow a combination of cleaning products, other people's lives, and existential dread. But here's the thing that hit me as I dropped my duffel bag on the questionable carpet and looked around. The silence was absolutely beautiful. I'm not talking about the absence of noise. I could hear the guy next door still arguing with someone about parking tickets, and the air conditioning unit under the window was making sounds like it was trying to communicate with dolphins. No, I'm talking about the absence of expectations. The absence of someone yelling at me because I left water spots on the bathroom counter. The absence of my mother-in-law Linda giving me one of her trademark lectures about what it means to be a provider while sipping wine that I'd paid for. I sat on the edge of the bed and it made this concerning creaking sound, but honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in what felt like years, I was existing in a space where nobody needed me to be anything other than a guy in a cheap hotel room. I wasn't disappointing anyone. I wasn't failing to meet someone's unspoken standards. I was just Miles, sitting on a questionable mattress, finally breathing air that didn't taste like resentment. I ordered a pizza, a real one this time, from an actual pizza place, because apparently that's what freedom tastes like, and sat cross-legged on the bed watching some terrible reality show about people buying storage units. The pizza arrived 40 minutes later, hot and excessive and completely unnecessary, and I ate half of it while laughing at grown adults fighting over a box of old Christmas decorations. Around midnight, just as I was considering calling it a night and seeing if the bed was as uncomfortable as it looked, my phone started buzzing like an angry hornet. Text messages started rolling in, one after another, and I watched them populate my screen with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for watching car crashes on YouTube. The first one was from Tara, "Where are you?" Followed immediately by, "Miles, this isn't funny." Then, "Can you at least let me know you're okay?" But the real winner, the absolute cherry on top of this dysfunctional Sunday, came from Linda, Tara's mother, the reigning queen of passive aggression, the woman who could make "bless your heart" sound like a death threat. Her text read, "Why's everyone freaking out?" I stared at that message for a long moment, letting the absurdity of it sink in. Why was everyone freaking out? Really, Linda? That was the question she was leading with. Not, "Is Miles okay?" or "What happened?" but a casual inquiry about why people were having emotional reactions to the fact that I'd left. Like I'd missed book club or forgotten to RSVP to a baby shower. Oh, I don't know, Linda. Maybe because your daughter treated her husband like expired leftovers? Maybe because I spent my birthday staring at a frozen pizza while contemplating the slow death of my dignity? Maybe because I finally grew a spine and decided I deserved better than being the supporting character in my own life? But I didn't type any of that. Instead, I did something that felt revolutionary. I turned off my phone. Just held down the power button and watched the screen go dark, cutting off the incoming tide of guilt trips and manipulation attempts. The silence that followed was profound. It was the kind of silence that makes you realize how much noise you've been tolerating. I brushed my teeth with the complimentary toothpaste that tasted like minty regret, changed into an old t-shirt, and climbed into the hotel bed. The sheets were scratchy and smelled like industrial detergent, but they were mine for the night. Nobody was going to roll over and complain that I was taking up too much space. Nobody was going to sigh dramatically because I was reading too late with the lamp on. The air conditioning unit hummed and rattled, occasionally making sounds like it was trying to achieve sentience, and somewhere down the hall someone was watching what sounded like an action movie at full volume. The guy next door had finally stopped arguing about parking tickets and was now snoring loud enough to register on the Richter scale. And you know what? It was perfect. Every weird sound, every questionable smell, every moment of this absolutely ridiculous situation was perfect because it was mine. I'd chosen it. I'd walked out of a life that was slowly suffocating me and into a cheap hotel room that smelled like other people's mistakes, and I felt oddly free. As I drifted off to sleep, I had this thought that made me smile in the dark. I hadn't burned that frozen pizza on my way out. I hadn't thrown a tantrum or broken anything or left a dramatic note. I just left. And somehow, That quiet exit felt more powerful than any grand gesture could have been. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out real logistics, where I'd actually stay, what I'd tell people, how I'd navigate this new reality. But tonight I was just a guy in room 237 of the Sunset Inn, falling asleep to the sound of malfunctioning air conditioning and distant action movies, feeling like maybe, just maybe, I'd finally done something right. Waking up in a cheap hotel room is a weird experience, especially when you're not there for a business trip or because you're having an affair with someone named Crystal who works in pharmaceutical sales. I woke up to sunlight streaming through curtains so thin they were basically decorative suggestions, and for about 3 seconds I forgot where I was. Then reality came crashing back like a hangover, except instead of tequila regrets, it was life choices. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand, which wobbled like it was one strong breeze away from collapsing, and made the mistake of turning it on. 47 notifications. 47. My phone literally vibrated in my hand for a solid 30 seconds like it was having a seizure. Messages from Tara, from Linda, from Jordan, from Tara's sister Rebecca, who I hadn't heard from since she asked me to help her move in 2019 and then never said thank you. Everyone's suddenly very concerned about my whereabouts now that I wasn't around to be conveniently ignored. I ignored all of them and opened my banking app instead, because apparently I'm the kind of person who starts their morning with financial anxiety instead of coffee like a normal human being. That's when I saw it. The beautiful, infuriating reality of my situation, laid out in neat little rows of automatic payments and monthly subscriptions. Netflix, $15.99 per month. In my name. Hulu, $14.99 per month. My credit card. Disney Plus, $10.99 per month. You guessed it, me again. HBO Max, $15.99 per month. Miles Carter, Party of One, paying for everyone's binge-watching habits. The internet bill, $89.99 per month. My account, cell phone plan, the family plan with 4 lines, $180 per month. And here's the kicker. One of those lines was for Jordan, my best friend, who apparently had been on my family plan for 2 years because he was between jobs, and I was such a good dude about it. Another line was for Linda, because of course Tara's mother couldn't possibly pay for her own phone service when she had a son-in-law who was just hemorrhaging money anyway. Spotify Premium Family Plan, $16.99 per month. I didn't even use Spotify. I was an Apple Music guy. But Tara insisted we needed Spotify for her workout playlists and her mom's audiobooks and Jordan's podcast subscriptions. The home security system, $49.99 per month. Protecting a house I wasn't even living in anymore. I kept scrolling, and the hits just kept coming. The cloud storage subscription. The meal kit delivery service that Tara used exactly twice before deciding cooking was not her vibe. The streaming service for fitness classes that Linda used to watch yoga videos she could have found for free on YouTube. Even the premium account for some recipe app that I'm 90% sure was being used by Jordan's girlfriend to plan her Instagram-worthy brunches. I sat there in that hotel bed, staring at my phone, doing the mental math. I was spending roughly $450 a month on services that primarily benefited everyone except me. $450. That's a car payment. That's a decent vacation fund. That's a therapy session every week with enough left over for the good coffee. And then, and this is where it gets really beautiful, I realized something that made me laugh out loud in that depressing hotel room. I had all the passwords. Every single account, every subscription, every service. They were all in my email, tied to my credit cards, accessible through my phone. I was the gatekeeper to their entire digital existence, and I'd been so busy being the reliable guy that I'd never even thought about what would happen if I just stopped. A plan started forming in my head, and let me tell you, it was the kind of plan that made me feel like a supervillain in the best possible way. Not an evil supervillain, more like a chaotic, neutral character who'd finally had enough of being everyone's financial safety net. I wasn't going to cancel everything immediately, because that would be rash and impulsive, and despite recent events, I'm still fundamentally a person who thinks things through. No, I was going to give them 3 days, 72 hours, a generous warning period that they wouldn't even know they were getting. In 3 days, I'd start canceling subscriptions, one by one, methodically, starting with the least essential and working my way up to the big ones. The streaming services would go first: goodbye, Netflix, sayonara, HBO Max. Then the phone plan. I'd port my number to a new individual plan and let the other three lines figure out their own situation. The internet bill would be last, because I'm not a complete monster, but it was definitely on the chopping block. I got out of bed, showered in the world's tiniest bathroom with water pressure that felt like someone spitting on me from a distance, and got dressed in yesterday's clothes because I'd packed in a hurry and hadn't really thought about the practicalities of extended hotel living. My reflection in the mirror looked tired but somehow lighter, like I'd put down a backpack I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. The coffee situation at the Sunset Inn was about what you'd expect from an $89 a night establishment. There was a complimentary breakfast set up in the lobby that consisted of a waffle maker that looked like it had seen combat, some sad-looking fruit in a bowl, and a coffee dispenser that gurgled and hissed like it was summoning demons. I grabbed a styrofoam cup, because of course they use styrofoam, environmental consciousness costs extra, and filled it with coffee that looked like it could strip paint off a car. Brandon was still at the front desk, or maybe he was there again. I couldn't tell if he'd worked an all-night shift or just really loved his job. He looked up from his phone and gave me a nod. Survivor of room 237. How'd you sleep? Like someone who finally made a decision, I said. That's weirdly specific, but I respect it. I grabbed a handful of those little creamer cups and a packet of sugar that was probably older than Brandon and walked outside to the parking lot. The morning air was crisp and cool, and the sky was that particular shade of blue that makes you think maybe things aren't completely terrible. I leaned against my car, popped the lid off my terrible coffee, and took a sip. It tasted like burnt dreams and questionable life choices, but it was mine, and I wasn't sharing it with anyone. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and started making a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, but a revenge list. Okay, revenge is a strong word. Let's call it an accountability list. An actions have consequences list. Maybe you should have thought about this before you gave me frozen pizza for my birthday list. Day 1. Today, research individual phone plans. Look into month-to-month apartment rentals. Call Maya about that job offer. Drink terrible hotel coffee and feel smug about it. Day 2. Port phone number to new plan. Change all passwords. Update billing addresses. Forward mail to somewhere that isn't my old house. Day 3. Cancel Netflix. Cancel Hulu. Cancel Disney Plus. Cancel HBO Max. Cancel Spotify. Remove unauthorized users from family phone plan. Sit back and wait for the chaos. Day 4. Cancel internet. Watch the world burn from a safe distance. I stood there in that hotel parking lot, holding my styrofoam cup of coffee that tasted like someone's abandoned hopes, and raised it in a toast to absolutely no one. To new beginnings, I said out loud, not caring if anyone heard me, and to finally not funding adult children disguised as in-laws. A woman getting into her car 3 spots over gave me a weird look, but I didn't care. Let her think I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was having a breakthrough, and the two things look remarkably similar from the outside. If sarcasm burned calories, I'd have been shredded by lunchtime. If pettiness was an Olympic sport, I'd be bringing home gold. But instead, I was just a guy in a hotel parking lot, drinking the worst coffee known to mankind, planning the most passive-aggressive exit strategy in the history of modern relationships. I finished my coffee, tossed the cup in the trash. Because unlike some people, I clean up my own messes and got back in my car. I had a phone plan to research, an email to send to Maya about that job offer, and a list of subscriptions that were about to learn what unauthorized charges meant. The best part? They had no idea what was coming. They were probably sitting at home right now, streaming their shows, scrolling through their phones, completely oblivious to the fact that their digital lifestyle was on a 3-day countdown to obsolescence. I pulled out of the Sunset Inn parking lot with a smile on my face, headed toward the nearest gas station for better coffee and maybe a breakfast burrito that wouldn't judge my life choices. The radio was playing some pop song about breaking free and finding yourself, and for once, the universe's sense of irony felt appropriate instead of insulting. 3 days. That's all they had left. 3 days of blissful ignorance before reality came knocking, and I wasn't going to be there to answer the door for them. The thing about executing a perfectly petty plan is that the waiting period is almost better than the actual revenge. It's like knowing you have chocolate cake in the fridge, but deciding to save it for later. The anticipation is half the pleasure. For 2 whole days, I existed in this beautiful bubble of calm where I knew exactly what was coming and nobody else had a clue. I spent those 48 hours in a state of zen-like peace that I haven't experienced since before I got married. I woke up when I wanted to wake up. I ate meals at weird times because there was nobody around to judge me for having leftover Chinese food at 10 in the morning. I watched whatever I wanted on my laptop without someone sighing dramatically because I wasn't interested in another documentary about minimalist tiny homes or whatever wellness trend Tara was pretending to care about that week. On day one of the calm, I went to a diner about 5 miles from the hotel. One of those classic American places with red vinyl booths and a laminated menu that's probably been the same since 1995. The waitress was named Dolores, according to her name tag, and she had the energy of someone who'd seen everything and was no longer impressed by human behavior. I ordered the biggest breakfast they had: pancakes, eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast, and coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of punishment. Hungry or heartbroken? Dolores asked, not even looking up from her order pad. Can it be both? I said. She cracked a smile. Rough week. You could say that. But it's getting better. Good, she said, pouring my coffee. Life's too short to stay miserable, especially when there are pancakes. Wise woman, Dolores. I left her a $20 tip because sometimes you meet people who restore your faith in humanity, and they deserve to know it. I spent the afternoon driving around town, reacquainting myself with a city I'd been living in for years but hadn't really seen. When you're stuck in a routine, work, home, obligations, repeat, you stop noticing things. You forget that there are actual places to explore, coffee shops you've never tried, parks you've never walked through. I went to a bookstore and bought 3 novels I've been meaning to read for years. I sat in a park and watched people jog by with their dogs, looking aggressively healthy and happy in that way that usually annoyed me, but somehow didn't today. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from Tara. Nothing urgent, just the usual stuff. Did you pay the electric bill? And where's the receipt for the lawnmower repair? And my personal favorite, can you pick up milk on your way home? On your way home. Like I was just running errands and would be back any minute to resume my position as the household's administrative assistant and ATM machine. I didn't respond to any of them. Radio silence. It was remarkable how liberating it felt to just not engage. For years, I'd trained myself to respond immediately to every text, every request, every minor emergency. Pavlov's dog had nothing on me. But now I was learning that I could just let my phone buzz and the world would keep spinning. On day 2, I called Maya about the job offer. Maya Chun had been my boss when I worked as a tutor during my last year of college, back when I still thought I might do something interesting with my life before I got sucked into corporate mediocrity. She'd started her own tutoring company in our college town about 3 hours north, and every few months she'd send me an email saying there was a position open if I ever wanted to escape whatever soul-crushing situation I'd gotten myself into. Miles Carter, she said when she picked up, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Please tell me you're finally taking me up on my offer. How'd you know? I asked. Because you're calling me on a Wednesday morning instead of sending your usual polite email declining. Something's changed. You could say that. Got any openings for a guy who's extremely qualified to teach test prep and moderately qualified to make terrible life decisions? Maya laughed. When can you start? We talked for 45 minutes about logistics, salary, benefits, all the boring adult stuff that somehow felt exciting because it represented an actual escape route. She had an apartment above the office that was vacant, month-to-month rent, fully furnished. It's not fancy, she warned me. Previous tenant was a grad student who thought throw pillows were a personality trait. But it's yours if you want it. I'll take it, I said, not even asking to see pictures. At this point, anywhere that wasn't connected to my old life sounded like paradise. You sure? Don't you want to talk to your wife about relocating? Maya, if I wanted to talk to my wife about things, I wouldn't be planning to move 3 hours away. There was a pause. Fair enough. I'll email you the lease agreement. Welcome back to the team, Miles. After I hung up, I sat in my car in the hotel parking lot and just breathed. I had a job. I had a place to live. I had an actual plan that extended beyond hiding in a cheap hotel and drinking questionable coffee. Things were coming together in a way that felt almost surreal. That evening, I treated myself to a nice dinner at a steakhouse, The kind of place Tara always said was too expensive for a random weeknight, but somehow wasn't too expensive when her friends wanted to celebrate someone's promotion or engagement. I ordered a ribeye, medium rare, with a loaded baked potato and a beer that cost $12 but tasted like victory. The waiter asked if I was celebrating something, and I said, yeah, my upcoming unemployment and divorce, which made him laugh nervously and back away slowly. Worth it. I went back to the hotel, watched a movie on my laptop, and fell asleep feeling genuinely content. Tomorrow was day 3. Tomorrow, the subscriptions would start dropping like flies. Tomorrow, the chaos would begin, and I'd get to watch it unfold from a safe distance. But then tomorrow came early. At 7:43 a.m. I know the exact time because I checked my phone when it started buzzing like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. The texts started rolling in. And not the gentle, confused texts I'd been expecting. No, these were full-blown panic texts. Tara, hey, did you mess with the Wi-Fi? I smiled. It had begun. I was brushing my teeth when the next one came through. Tara, Miles, seriously, the internet isn't working and I have a Zoom call in 20 minutes. Then, 5 minutes later, Miles. My phone just stopped working. Like completely stopped. What did you do? I rinsed my mouth, taking my time, enjoying every second of this. Through the bathroom door, I could hear my phone absolutely losing its mind with notifications. By the time I walked back into the room, there were 17 new messages. 17. It was like Christmas morning. If Christmas morning involved watching your entire family realize they'd been financially cut off. Tara had progressed from confused to panicked. Miles, my phone's not working. None of our phones are working. What's happening? Linda had entered the chat. Miles, I don't know what's going on, but my phone service is out, and so is Tara's. Is there an outage? Jordan, good old Jordan, had sent. Dude, my phone line is dead. Did you forget to pay the bill? Did I forget? That's adorable, Jordan. I didn't forget anything. I remembered everything, actually. Every month I paid that bill. Every time you said, thanks, man, and never offered to contribute. I remembered all of it. Then came my favorite message of the morning, from Tara. My mom says I should call you. Please don't do anything crazy. I stared at that message for a long moment, savoring it like fine wine. Don't do anything crazy. That was rich coming from the woman who gave me frozen pizza for my birthday and expected me to stick around indefinitely funding everyone's digital lifestyle. Oh, Linda, I thought, if only you knew that my version of crazy was sitting quietly in a hotel room drinking coffee that tasted like burnt dreams and canceled subscriptions. If only you knew that my grand act of rebellion was simply choosing not to pay for things that didn't benefit me. The horror. The absolute chaos. I typed out my response with the care of someone crafting a masterpiece. No long explanation. No justification. No essay about feelings or boundaries. Just one simple emoji. Thumbs up. I hit send and watched the message deliver. One thumbs up. That's all they got. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, terrifies control freaks more than a complete non-reaction. My phone immediately started ringing. Tara. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. Then Linda tried. Declined. Then Jordan. Rebecca. Even Tara's dad, Rick, who hadn't called me since he dialed me during Thanksgiving 2022. I turned my phone to silent, set it face down on the nightstand, and went to take a shower. Let them spiral. I had a checkout time to meet and a new life to start. There's something weirdly symbolic about packing your entire life into a Honda Accord and driving away from everything you've known for the past decade. It's like being in one of those indie movies where the protagonist has a revelation and just hits the road. Except instead of a cool vintage convertible and a carefully curated soundtrack, you've got a car that makes a weird rattling noise above 50 miles per hour and a playlist that keeps shuffling to breakup songs like your phone is trying to make a point. I checked out of the Sunset Inn at exactly 11 a.m., which was checkout time, because even in the midst of a life crisis, I'm still the kind of person who follows hotel policies. Brandon was at the desk again. Or still, I honestly couldn't tell anymore. And he gave me a little salute as I turned in my key card. Good luck out there, man, he said. Hope you find whatever you're looking for. Thanks, Brandon. Keep fighting the good fight with that waffle maker. It's a losing battle, but somebody's got to do it. I threw my duffel bag in the trunk, which also contained everything else I'd managed to pack in my hasty escape. A box of books, my laptop, 3 pairs of shoes, enough socks and underwear to last me until I either found a laundromat or gave up on society entirely. And a framed photo of my dog from childhood, because apparently even in the middle of a divorce, I'm still sentimental about a golden retriever who died in 2008. The drive north to my college town was supposed to take about 3 hours, but I was in no rush. For the first time in years, I had nowhere I needed to be at any specific time. No meetings, no obligations. No wife texting me a grocery list with 17 items that somehow all needed to be the organic version. Just me, the open road, and the distinct possibility that I was having either a breakthrough or a breakdown. The jury was still out. I merged onto the highway, and immediately my phone started ringing through the car's Bluetooth system. Tara's name flashed on the dashboard screen like a warning light. I hit decline and turned off Bluetooth entirely, because I was learning that sometimes the best response is no response at all. Let her think I'd driven into a tunnel. Let her think I'd dropped my phone in a lake. Let her think whatever she wanted. I was done providing explanations for my existence. The radio became my only companion, and it had apparently decided that today was songs about love gone wrong day. Every station I flipped to was playing either a bitter breakup anthem or an overly optimistic song about finding yourself after heartbreak. At one point, I Will Survive came on, the Gloria Gaynor version, not some modern cover, and I cranked it up and sang along like I was auditioning for the world's saddest karaoke competition. A truck driver in the next lane looked over at me belting out lyrics about changing locks and growing strong, and I just nodded at him like this was completely normal behavior. He gave me a thumbs up. Brotherhood of the road, I guess. We've all been there, fighting our demons at 70 miles per hour while Gloria Gaynor provides the soundtrack. About an hour into the drive, I stopped at a rest area that had the aesthetic of a building that had given up on life sometime in the 90s. The bathroom smelled like broken dreams and industrial cleaner, and the vending machines looked like they might contain either snacks or anthrax. It was hard to tell. I grabbed a coffee from a machine that charged $3 for what tasted like someone's interpretation of what coffee might be, and stood outside watching families shuffle between minivans and SUVs. There was this one couple, probably in their 50s, and they moved around each other with this easy familiarity that made me realize I'd never had that with Tara. Every interaction we'd had in the last few years felt like a negotiation or a performance. This couple, though, the guy just handed his wife a napkin without her asking. She adjusted his collar without thinking about it. Small gestures that added up to something real. I wondered if Tara and I had ever had that, or if we'd just been playing house from the beginning, following some script about what marriage was supposed to look like without ever figuring out what we actually wanted it to be. Deep thoughts at a highway rest stop. That's where I was in life now. I got back in my car and kept driving, and the landscape slowly started to change. The sprawling suburbs gave way to smaller towns, then to actual countryside with farms and cows, and the kind of pastoral scenery that makes you understand why people write country songs. The further I got from the city, the lighter I felt, like I was literally driving away from weight I'd been carrying. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, silenced but still visible, and I could see notifications piling up. 53 messages. 53. I laughed out loud in my empty car, because what else are you supposed to do when your entire family loses their collective mind because you stop paying for their streaming services? 2.5 hours into the drive, I started seeing familiar landmarks. The billboard for that sketchy fireworks store that was always going out of business, but never actually closed. The exit for the state park where my college friends and I used to go hiking when we were pretending to be outdoorsy. The water tower painted to look like a giant basketball, because apparently in the 80s that seemed like a good idea. I took the exit for Millbrook, my old college town, and felt this weird mixture of nostalgia and hope. This place held memories of a version of me that still had potential before I'd settled into a comfortable life that turned out to be slowly suffocating me. The downtown area hadn't changed much. Same brick buildings, same locally owned shops trying desperately to compete with the strip mall on the highway, same coffee shop where I'd spent countless hours studying and pretending to understand philosophy. Actually, wait. The coffee shop was different. It used to be called The Daily Grind, but now the sign read June's Brew in cheerful yellow letters with a little sun logo. Cute. Probably new ownership trying to put a personal touch on things. I parked on Main Street, found a spot right in front, which never would have happened in the city, and sat in my car for a moment, watching people walk by. College students with backpacks looking stressed about midterms. Older folks moving at a slower pace, actually making eye contact with each other. A guy walking 3 dogs at once, and somehow making it look easy. This could work. This could actually work. I grabbed my wallet and headed into June's Brew, pushing open the door to the sound of a little bell chiming. An actual bell, not a recording. The place smelled like fresh coffee and baked goods and possibility. It was warm without being stuffy, busy without being crowded, and had that perfect coffee shop ambience that makes you want to stay for 3 hours with a laptop and pretend you're writing the next great American novel. Behind the counter was a woman about my age with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and an apron that said, "Powered by coffee and sarcasm." She was steaming milk for someone's latte with the focused concentration of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. When she looked up and saw me standing there, she smiled. And here's the thing that got me. It was a real smile. Not a customer service smile. Not a polite but exhausted smile. An actual, genuine, reaches your eyes kind of smile that made me realize I hadn't seen one of those directed at me in longer than I cared to admit. "Welcome to June's," she said. "What can I get you?" "Are you June?" I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to confirm that yes, some people actually name their businesses after themselves, and that's adorable. Guilty as charged. Opened this place 6 months ago and immediately regretted the pressure of having my name on everything. She grinned. "If the coffee's bad, it's a personal failure. If it's good, well, at least my ego gets a boost." "I'll take a large latte," I said. "And maybe a boost of optimism if you've got that on the menu." She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that sounds like someone actually found you funny instead of just being polite. "Rough day." "More like rough decade with a particularly terrible birthday as the grand finale," I said. "But I'm told coffee helps." June started making my latte, and I watched her work with the kind of casual competence that comes from doing something you actually enjoy. "Birthday, huh? Let me guess, someone forgot." Worse. Someone remembered but thought a frozen pizza still in its plastic wrap counted as a celebration. She stopped mid-pour and looked at me with this expression of genuine horror mixed with amusement. "You're joking." I wish I was. Frozen pizza. Not even preheated. Just sitting on the counter like a sad monument to low expectations. June finished my latte and slid it across the counter, and I noticed she'd done one of those fancy leaf designs in the foam. "Well, mysterious frozen pizza guy, consider this latte my retroactive birthday present. On the house. You don't have to. I insist. Anyone who's been through the great frozen pizza incident of whatever year this happened deserves at least one free coffee." I took the latte and raised it in a toast. "To new beginnings and coffee shop owners who restore your faith in humanity." "I'll drink to that," she said, raising her own cup. Even though mine's decaf because I've already had 4 shots of espresso today and my heart is staging a rebellion. That laugh. Her laugh was the first genuine sound of joy I'd heard in months, and it felt like maybe, just maybe, I'd made the right decision driving north to start over. Day 3 arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train crashing through a nitroglycerin factory. I woke up in my car. Yeah, my actual car, parked behind June's coffee shop because I'd stayed until closing time talking to her about everything from terrible exes to the correct way to make a grilled cheese sandwich, and then realized it was too late to go check out Maya's apartment. June had said I could crash in my car in her parking lot because apparently this town still believed in basic human decency. Wild concept. My phone had died sometime during the night, which was probably a blessing. I plugged it into my car charger and watched it come back to life with all the enthusiasm of someone watching a horror movie where you know the killer's behind the door. The screen lit up and immediately had a stroke trying to load all the notifications. 89 messages. 89. I had 89 unread messages, and it wasn't even 7 in the morning yet. I scrolled through them with the detached fascination of someone watching a reality show about people who hoard exotic animals. The progression was beautiful. A perfect arc from confusion to panic to anger to desperation. It was like watching the 5 stages of grief, except instead of accepting death, they were accepting the death of their unlimited streaming capabilities. The messages had started around midnight, which tracked. That's when Netflix does its thing where it boots you out and makes you sign back in. Except this time, there was no account to sign back into, because I'd canceled it at exactly 11:47 p.m. the previous night while eating leftover pad thai in my hotel room. Tara, 12:03 a.m. Netflix won't load. Tara, 12:15 a.m. Seriously, Netflix is broken. Did you change the password? Tara, 12:47 a.m. Miles. Nothing is working. Not Netflix, not Hulu, nothing. Then Linda entered the chat at 1:23 a.m., which meant she'd been up late binge-watching something and got the shock of her entitled life. Linda, Miles, I don't know what's going on with the streaming services, but they're all saying the account is closed. There must be some kind of error. Can you call customer service in the morning? Can I call customer service? That's adorable, Linda. Sure. Let me just call them up and explain that I intentionally canceled everything because your daughter gave me frozen pizza for my birthday and I finally grew a spine. I'm sure they'll fix it right up. The messages continued through the early morning hours, each one more panicked than the last. It was like watching dominoes fall, except the dominoes were pampered adults realizing they actually had to pay for their own stuff. Jordan, 3:47 a.m. Yo, my phone's completely dead. Like no service at all. What's happening? Rebecca, 4:15 a.m. Miles, Tara called me from a neighbor's phone crying about the internet being out. What did you do? What did I do? What did I do? I stopped being a human ATM, Rebecca. I stopped funding a lifestyle for people who couldn't even remember my birthday. I stopped setting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. That's what I did. But my absolute favorite, the crown jewel of this entire message thread, came from Rick, Tara's father, who hadn't spoken to me directly since Christmas 2023 when he cornered me by the eggnog and gave me a 20-minute lecture about providing for family, while I stood there wondering if it was socially acceptable to fake a heart attack to escape a conversation. Rick, 6:42 a.m. A real man doesn't abandon his family. I stared at that message for a solid minute, letting it sink in. A real man doesn't abandon his family. This coming from the guy who went on a fishing trip during his daughter's college graduation because he needed to clear his head. This coming from Mr. I'll just put it on Miles's tab at every family dinner. This coming from someone who genuinely believed that masculinity was measured by how much emotional and financial abuse you could tolerate while maintaining a smile. I typed out about 17 different responses in my head, each one more scathing than the last. I wanted to explain to Rick that a real man knows his worth. That a real man doesn't let people treat him like a convenience store that's open 24 hours for their emergencies. That a real man can recognize when he's being used and actually do something about it instead of just complaining about kids these days and their entitlement, while being the most entitled person in the room. But you know what I actually sent? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because the thing about people like Rick is that they don't actually want a conversation. They want validation. They want you to engage so they can feel important and wise and like they've made some kind of point. And the most powerful thing you can do to someone who's trying to manipulate you through guilt is just not play the game. I did, however, screenshot his message and send it to Maya with the caption, "My father-in-law's thoughts on masculinity." Also, he's been on my phone plan for 2 years without contributing a dime. Maya responded within minutes. "I've known you for an hour and I already know you're more of a man than this dude. Want me to send him a strongly worded email about emotional intelligence?" God, I loved Maya. The messages kept coming as I sat in my car, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and orange that seemed way too cheerful for the chaos unfolding in my phone. It was like being inside the eye of a hurricane, watching the destruction from a safe distance while maintaining perfect calm. Tara had moved from anger to negotiation, which was a predictable stage. Tara, 7:03 a.m. Miles, I know you're mad, but this is affecting everyone. Can we at least talk about the phone plan? My mom needs her phone for work. Linda didn't work. Linda was retired and spent her days watching home improvement shows and texting unsolicited advice to people who didn't ask for it. But sure, let's pretend her phone was essential for her non-existent career. Then Jordan chimed in with what might be the most Jordan message ever sent. Jordan, 7:21 a.m. Bro, she's saying you hacked the Wi-Fi. I told her that's not how Wi-Fi works, but she's convinced you did something technical and malicious. Also, can you turn my phone back on? I have a date tonight. I had to laugh at that one. I actually laughed out loud in my car, probably looking like a crazy person to anyone passing by. Jordan's girlfriend. Excuse me, his date. Needed to call him about their plans, and somehow this was my emergency to solve. The same Jordan who'd been on my phone plan since 2023 and had literally never once offered to contribute. The same Jordan who got fireworks and champagne fountains for his birthday, while I got freezer-burn disappointment. No, Jordan. No, you can't have your phone back. Go buy a prepaid phone at a gas station like the rest of US peasants did before family plans were invented. Experience the joy of limited minutes and paying your own way. Build some character. I scrolled further and found a message from Tara's work friend Melissa, who I'd met exactly twice and who apparently felt qualified to weigh in on my personal life. Melissa, 7:44 a.m. Miles, I don't know what's going on between you and Tara, but punishing her like this is really immature. You're acting like a child. Punishing her. That's the word they kept using. Punishing. Like choosing not to pay for someone else's luxuries was some kind of vindictive attack instead of just normal boundaries that functioning adults should have. I wanted to respond to Melissa with a detailed breakdown of exactly how much money I'd spent over the years funding everyone else's comfort while my own needs were treated as optional. I wanted to calculate the exact dollar amount of frozen pizza versus Jordan's birthday party and send her a spreadsheet. I wanted to explain that sometimes punishment is just consequences wearing a different outfit. But again, I didn't respond. Because Melissa didn't actually matter. Her opinion was worth exactly as much as she'd contributed to my phone bill. Nothing. The final message that made me actually put my phone down and take a deep breath came from Linda at 8:02 a.m. Linda, I raised my daughter to be a good wife. This is breaking her heart. I hope you're proud of yourself. And there it was. The ultimate guilt trip. The nuclear option. The think of how this affects my daughter card. As if I hadn't spent 10 years thinking about exactly that while my own feelings were treated like they were optional features nobody ordered. I looked at that message, sitting in my car behind a coffee shop in a town I'd fled to for a fresh start, and I realized something profound. I actually was kind of proud of myself. Proud that I'd finally drawn a line. Proud that I'd stopped accepting crumbs and calling it a meal. Proud that when faced with the choice between maintaining peace and maintaining my dignity, I'd chosen myself for once. I turned my phone face down, grabbed my toiletry bag, and headed into June's coffee shop. She was just unlocking the front door, probably wondering why there was some random guy sitting in his car in her parking lot at 8 in the morning. Morning, she said, not even looking surprised. Rough night. You could say that. Any chance you know where a guy can find a shower and maybe some industrial-strength coffee? She grinned. Gym's 2 blocks down. They do day passes. And the industrial coffee? That I can help with right now. You're a lifesaver, June. Nah, she said, flipping the lights on inside the shop. Just someone who recognizes a fellow survivor when she sees one. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of peaceful quiet that makes you think maybe the universe has decided to give you a break. I'd moved into Maya's apartment above the tutoring office 2 days earlier, and I was still in that honeymoon phase with the place where even the creaky floorboards seemed charming instead of annoying. The apartment was exactly as advertised, small, fully furnished by someone who thought throw pillows could solve any decorating problem, and absolutely perfect for a guy who needed to start over with minimal baggage. I'd spent Friday night setting up my laptop, organizing my clothes in the tiny closet, and enjoying the revolutionary concept of living in a space where nobody yelled at me for leaving a coffee mug on the counter. The previous tenant, some grad student named Bethany, according to the passive-aggressive notes she'd left about which light switches controlled which outlets, had left behind approximately 47 decorative pillows, a collection of succulents in various states of death, and a shower curtain with inspirational quotes that I'd immediately replaced with a plain blue one because I didn't need "dream big" staring at me while I shampooed. I woke up around 8, made coffee in the little single-serve maker that looked like it had been purchased during the Obama administration, and was contemplating whether I had the energy to walk to June's shop for a real breakfast when I heard footsteps on the stairs leading up to my apartment. Heavy, determined footsteps. The kind of footsteps that meant someone had driven 3 hours with a mission. Then came the knock. Not a polite "hello, is anyone home" knock. This was a "we need to talk, and I'm not leaving until we do" knock. The kind of knock that makes your stomach drop even when you've been expecting it. I looked through the peephole, which was so old it made everything look like a fisheye lens from a 90s music video. And there she was. Tara, standing in the hallway of my new apartment building, 3 hours away from home, at 8:30 on a Saturday morning. And here's the detail that I will remember for the rest of my life. She was wearing an old hoodie that said, "Live, Laugh, Love," in that cursive font that's required by law to appear on at least one item in every suburban home. The irony level was off the charts. The woman who'd given me frozen pizza for my birthday was standing at my door wearing a hoodie about living and laughing and loving, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing in her face through the door. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the mirror by the door to make sure I didn't look as emotionally destroyed as she probably hoped, and opened it. "Tara," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "How'd you find me?" "Your boss, Maya," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "I called the tutoring company. Told them it was a family emergency." Of course she did. Classic Tara move. Manipulate the situation, make herself the victim, get what she wants through whatever means necessary. I made a mental note to talk to Maya about establishing some boundaries with my personal information. "It's not an emergency," I said. "Everything's fine. I'm fine. Are you?" She looked past me into the apartment, taking in the throw pillows and dead succulents and the general aesthetic of persons starting over in their mid-30s. "This is what you left me for? This place?" "I didn't leave you for a place, Tara. I left you because you treated me like an appliance that you occasionally remembered to maintain." Her eyes got that shiny look they always got when she was about to deploy tears as a tactical weapon. "You're really going to do this? Over a pizza?" And there it was. The reduction of 10 years of slow emotional erosion into one frozen pizza. Like that was the entire problem. Like I'd thrown away a marriage because of a grocery store purchase. "No," I said, and I felt this weird calm settle over me. Over 10 years of being the side character in my own life story. The pizza was just the moment I realized I'd been edited out of the narrative entirely. "What are you even talking about?" She crossed her arms, defensive now. "I've always supported you. I've always been there. You threw Jordan a party with fireworks and a champagne fountain. You gave me a frozen pizza, still in the wrapper. And when I asked you why, you said I wasn't the celebrating type." I leaned against the doorframe, blocking her view into my new life. "But the real issue isn't the pizza, Tara. It's that you genuinely don't see the problem." She wiped at her eyes, smearing mascara that she'd clearly applied in the car. "You've always been so dramatic, Miles. Always making everything into some big emotional production." I actually laughed at that. Couldn't help it. The absurdity was too perfect. "And you've always been so." I paused, searching for the right word, undercooked. What does that even mean? It means you're like that pizza. Half finished. All potential, no follow-through. You talk about love and partnership and building a life together, but when it comes time to actually show up, you're still frozen in the package. Her face went through several expressions: confusion, hurt, anger, before landing on determination. "Fine. You want to talk about showing up? Let's talk about how you abandoned your family. How you canceled everything without even talking to me first. How you left my mother without phone service. How you're being completely selfish and childish. Your mother is 63 years old and perfectly capable of paying for her own phone. She's family, Miles. That's what family does. We help each other. Helping is reciprocal, Tara. What you're describing is me being an ATM while everyone else makes withdrawals and never deposits." She shifted tactics, and I could see it happening in real time. The softening of her posture, the slight head tilt, the voice that went from accusatory to pleading. "What about Jordan? He needs his phone for work. His girlfriend needs to call him about brunch plans. You're affecting other people's lives." I had to process that for a second. Jordan's girlfriend needs to call him about brunch. Yes, that's the emergency you're presenting to me right now. Brunch coordination. Don't be like that. You know what I mean. I really don't, Tara. Because what I'm hearing is that Jordan, a 34-year-old man with a college degree and a job, can't figure out how to get his own phone plan so his girlfriend can call him about pancakes. And somehow that's my problem to solve. "You used to be so much kinder," she said, going for the guilt angle. "You used to care about people. I still care about people. I just don't care about being used anymore. There's a difference." We stood there in the doorway. This woman I'd been married to for 10 years, and I realized I was looking at a stranger. Or maybe I was finally seeing her clearly for the first time. Either way, whatever connection we'd had, or thought we'd had, was gone. It had probably been gone for years, and we'd both just been too comfortable or too scared to acknowledge it. Is this really what you want? She asked, her voice small now. To throw away everything we built? What did we build, Tara? Honestly, what did we build? Because from where I'm standing, I built a lot of things. I built a stable income that funded everyone else's lifestyle. I built patience for your family's endless demands. I built a tolerance for being treated like I didn't matter. But what did we build together? She didn't have an answer for that. Just stood there in her live, laugh, love, hoodie, looking lost and confused like someone had suddenly changed the rules of a game she thought she was winning. I'm not trying to be cruel, I said, and I meant it. But I'm also not going to set myself on fire to keep everyone else warm anymore. You want the phone plan back on? Pay for it yourself. You want streaming services? Subscribe to them. You want a husband who shows up for you? Try showing up for him first. So that's it. You're just done. Yeah, Tara. I'm done being an afterthought. I'm done being convenient. I'm done being the guy who gets frozen pizza while everyone else gets fireworks. I could see her gearing up for another argument, another guilt trip, another manipulation tactic from the playbook she'd been using for years. But I didn't have the energy for it anymore. More importantly, I didn't have the obligation. I need to get ready for work, I said, which wasn't true. It was Saturday, and I didn't start at the tutoring center until Monday. But she didn't need to know that. Drive safe going back. And then I did something that felt both incredibly simple and incredibly powerful. I closed the door. Not a slam. Not an angry bang that would give her ammunition for the story she'd tell about how cruel and dramatic I was being. Just a slow, deliberate, polite closing of the door. I heard her stand there for a minute, probably debating whether to knock again. Then footsteps, retreating down the stairs. The sound of the building's front door opening and closing. A car engine starting in the parking lot below. I walked to the window and watched her drive away in the SUV that I'd helped pay off 2 years earlier. She sat in the driver's seat for a solid 5 minutes before pulling out, probably texting people about what a terrible person I was, probably calling Linda to report on the failed mission. I felt nothing. No regret, no sadness, no triumph. Just a quiet sense of relief that this chapter was finally, definitively closed. Revenge, but make it classy. I grabbed my keys and headed down to June's coffee shop. I needed a real breakfast, and maybe some conversation with someone who actually seemed to enjoy my company. Living in a small town after spending a decade in the suburbs is like switching from a loud rock concert to a library. The silence is so profound you start hearing things you forgot existed. Like birds, and your own thoughts. And the sound of your neighbor Mrs. Patterson walking her corgi past your window every morning at exactly 7:15 while singing what I can only assume are show tunes from the 1960s. A week had passed since Tara showed up at my door in her ironic hoodie, and I'd settled into a routine that felt suspiciously like peace. Wake up, coffee at June's. Work at the tutoring center helping high school kids understand SAT prep and why Shakespeare still mattered. More coffee at June's. Home to my apartment full of throw pillows. Sleep. Repeat. It was simple and boring and absolutely perfect. Maya had been incredible about the whole situation. She didn't pry, didn't ask invasive questions, just gave me space to exist and occasionally dropped off containers of homemade soup because apparently that's what normal, emotionally healthy people do for each other. Who knew? I was sitting in my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, grading practice essays from a student who thought Romeo and Juliet was about two kids who made bad choices because of poor parental supervision when my phone rang. Maya. That was weird. She usually just texted unless it was something important. Hey, I answered. What's up? So, Maya said, and I could hear the barely contained laughter in her voice. I just got the most interesting phone call. Define interesting. Your mother-in-law called the tutoring center trying to track you down. I sat up straight, nearly knocking over my coffee. Linda called you? How did she even get this number? Apparently, she's been calling every tutoring company within a 100-mile radius. Very determined woman. She told my receptionist it was a family emergency and that she needed to speak with you immediately regarding urgent financial matters. Oh my God, it gets better, Maya said. When Jessica told her you weren't available, Linda asked for your home address because, as your employer, I have a legal obligation to provide that information to family members in crisis. I had to laugh. I actually had to laugh because the audacity was impressive. What did you tell her? I told her you joined witness protection and I wasn't legally allowed to disclose your location. You didn't. I absolutely did. She sputtered for about 30 seconds and then hung up. Jessica said it was the highlight of her week. Maya paused. Should I be worried? Is this woman going to show up here with a SWAT team? No, she's just mad that I stopped funding her phone plan, and now she actually has to use her retirement money on things like cell service. The horror. The absolute tragedy, Maya said. Anyway, I wanted to give you a heads up in case she escalates to skywriting or hiring a private investigator. After we hung up, I sat there marveling at the commitment it must have taken for Linda to call multiple tutoring companies trying to hunt me down. That was dedication. Misguided, boundary-crossing dedication, but dedication nonetheless. Out of morbid curiosity, and because apparently I enjoy emotional self-harm, I grabbed my laptop and logged into the family's shared Google Drive. We'd set it up years ago for sharing documents and photos, and I'd honestly forgotten I still had access. Nobody had bothered to remove me, probably because Tara didn't know how and was too proud to ask. The main folder had the usual suspects: tax documents, home repairs, vacation photos from 2019. But there were some new additions that made me actually snort coffee through my nose. First folder, emergency bills. I clicked it open. Inside were screenshots of every disconnection notice, every email from Netflix and Hulu about canceled subscriptions, every text from phone carriers about suspended service. They documented the entire crisis like they were building a legal case. There were even photos of Linda's phone screen showing no service, like that was evidence of my war crimes. Second folder, apology drafts. Oh, this was going to be good. Inside were at least a dozen Word documents with various attempts at crafting the perfect apology to lure me back into funding their lifestyle. I opened the first one, titled Apology, Version 1, Emotional Angle. Dear Miles, we realize now that we may have taken your generosity for granted. May have. The uncertainty was killing me. I opened another one. Apology, Version 3, Financial Compromise. Dear Miles, what if we agreed to pay you back for half of the streaming services over the next 18 months? Half. Over 18 months. So essentially they wanted to reimburse me about $6 per month for services they'd been using for years. The math wasn't mathing, as the kids would say. The best one, though, was titled Apology, Mom's Version, Guilt Trip. Dear Miles, Linda wanted me to tell you that she's been unable to reach her cardiologist because her phone isn't working, and this could be a matter of life and death. Linda didn't have a cardiologist. Linda had the cholesterol levels of a marathon runner and bragged about it constantly. The woman ate kale for fun. But sure, let's pretend this was a medical emergency. Then I saw it. The folder that made this entire snooping expedition worthwhile. Miles being difficult. I clicked it with the enthusiasm of someone about to watch a train wreck in slow motion, and what I found was somehow worse and better than I could have imagined. It was full of memes. Memes. They'd made memes about me. There was one of that guy from The Office looking annoyed with the caption, "When your husband cancels Netflix because you gave him frozen pizza." Another was the distracted boyfriend meme. Boyfriend looking at being petty, girlfriend labeled having a mature conversation, with the caption, Miles choosing violence. They'd made a whole collection. Screenshots of my thumbs up emoji with dramatic captions. A compilation of text where I just didn't respond, labeled the silent treatment, a masterclass. Even a poorly edited image of me as a Disney villain with the caption, Miles destroys family Wi-Fi, 2024, colorized. The commitment to documenting their victimhood was honestly impressive. They'd put more effort into these memes than they had into remembering my birthday. I was still scrolling through this digital monument to their wounded feelings when my phone rang. Jordan. I stared at his name on the screen, debating whether to answer. We hadn't spoken since the great subscription cancellation of 2024, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Curiosity won. I answered. Miles, man, we need to talk. Jordan's voice sounded weird. Strained. Like he was hiding in a closet or something. What's up, dude? Tara's telling everyone you've lost it. Like, completely lost your mind. She's saying you had some kind of breakdown and fled to the wilderness. I'm in a college town, Jordan. There's a Starbucks on the corner. This is hardly the wilderness. Yeah, I figured. But she's going hard with the narrative. Posted on Facebook about how she's worried about your mental health and asking for prayers. She posted on Facebook. I said it flatly, not even as a question. Of course she did. Public sympathy was Tara's favorite currency. It gets worse. Linda's telling people you stole money from them and disappeared. Stole money? I stopped paying for their stuff. That's not theft. That's called having boundaries. There was a pause, and then Jordan said something that absolutely floored me. Bro, between you and me, you're kind of my hero right now. What? His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm serious. Everyone's been texting me asking if you're okay, and I've been telling them, yeah, you're fine. You just finally figured out what the rest of us are too scared to do. Which is, put yourself first, man. Stand up for yourself. Stop being everyone's ATM and emotional punching bag. He laughed, but it sounded bitter. Sarah, my girlfriend, she asked me why I don't have my own phone plan, and I didn't have a good answer. You know what I realized? I'm 34 years old, and I've been on your family plan for 2 years because it was easier than being a grown-up. I didn't know what to say. Jordan, Party Jordan, Fireworks Jordan, the guy who'd never met a responsibility he couldn't avoid, was having an epiphany. I got my own plan yesterday, he continued. Paid for 3 months up front. And man, it felt good. Like I was finally acting my age. Jordan, No, let me finish. What Tara did to you was messed up. The pizza thing, the way she treated you like you didn't matter, all of it. And everyone just went along with it because you never complained. You just kept paying and showing up and being the reliable guy. He paused. But you don't have to be that guy anymore. You can just be Miles. Tell her I found it. I said. Found what? My mind. Tell her I found it. It was under a pile of unpaid bills and resentment. Silence on the other end. Then Jordan laughed, really laughed, the kind of genuine sound I hadn't heard from him in years. You're kind of my hero, bro, he whispered again, like he was afraid someone would hear him. I didn't expect that twist. There's something deeply weird about receiving handwritten letters in 2024. It's like getting a telegram or finding a payphone that actually works. It exists in this space between nostalgic and vaguely threatening. So when I came home from work on a Thursday afternoon and found a cream-colored envelope propped against my apartment door, my first thought was either someone had died or I was being served with divorce papers disguised as a Pinterest project. The envelope had my name written in Tara's handwriting, which I recognized immediately because I'd seen it on countless grocery lists and passive-aggressive notes about leaving dishes in the sink. Her handwriting had this specific quality that I can only describe as regret mixed with bad eyeliner, loopy and dramatic with inconsistent pressure, like she'd written it while crying or at least trying to look like she was crying. I picked it up, held it for a second, and seriously considered just throwing it away without reading it. That would have been the healthy boundary move, right? Just toss it in the trash and move on with my life. But curiosity is a hell of a drug, and I'm apparently still addicted to bad decisions when it comes to my ex-wife. I made myself a cup of tea, actual tea, not coffee, because this felt like a tea-drinking moment, and sat down on my couch surrounded by Bethany's army of throw pillows. The envelope wasn't sealed properly. She'd used one of those little sticker things that said, "With love," in gold script, which felt like either intentional irony or complete obliviousness. With Tara, it was genuinely 50-50. I opened it carefully, half expecting glitter to explode everywhere, because that seemed like something she'd do. Inside was 3 pages of cream stationery, the fancy kind you buy at places like HomeGoods when you're trying to convince yourself you're the type of person who writes letters. The paper even had a faint floral pattern in the corners. Very classy. Very. I'm having a moment of growth and reflection. Dear Miles, it started, and I immediately noticed she'd written dear, and then crossed it out and written it again, darker. A false start. Great beginning. I've been doing a lot of thinking since you left, and I wanted to reach out to tell you how I'm feeling. I know things ended badly between us, and I didn't mean to make you feel that way. I stopped reading and had to take a breath. Didn't mean to make you feel that way. That phrase right there, that beautiful, classic non-apology that takes zero responsibility while sounding like it's taking all the responsibility. She didn't mean to. It just happened. Accidentally. Like giving your husband frozen pizza for his birthday was some kind of cosmic accident that she had no control over. Translation, she absolutely meant to. Or at the very least, she didn't care enough to not do it, which is functionally the same thing. I kept reading, morbid fascination propelling me forward. Looking back, I realized that maybe I took you for granted sometimes. You were always so reliable, so steady, And I think I started to see that as just who you were instead of recognizing all the effort you were putting in. You made everything look so easy that I forgot it was work. Okay, that was almost self-aware. Almost. Except it was still framed as I forgot, instead of I chose not to acknowledge. Like my contributions to our life together were so seamless and invisible that she just couldn't help but overlook them. Poor Tara, victim of my competence. The letter continued for another page and a half, and it was fascinating in the way watching a car crash in slow motion is fascinating. She talked about how hard the last few weeks had been for her, noticed the focus on her, and how she'd been really struggling without me there to handle things. She mentioned that her mom had been so stressed about the phone situation and that Jordan had been really inconvenienced by having to get his own plan. Not once did she mention my birthday. Not once did she acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, the frozen pizza incident was emblematic of a larger pattern of behavior. Nope, this was all about how my absence was affecting everyone else. But then, on page 3, she wrote something that made me actually laugh out loud in my apartment, probably concerning Mrs. Patterson next door who was already suspicious of me. I think part of the problem was that you were always so independent. You never really needed me for anything, and that made it hard to know how to show up for you. You've always been this way. Too self-sufficient, too okay with being alone. Maybe if you'd asked for more, I would have known how to give it. Too independent, too self-sufficient, too okay with being alone. Translation: you were inconveniently self-aware and didn't need me to function, which made it harder for me to feel important without actually having to do anything important. She'd managed to turn my basic emotional maturity into a character flaw. That took skill, honestly. Olympic-level mental gymnastics. She'd stuck the landing on that rationalization. The letter ended with, I hope you're doing okay wherever you are. I miss you, even though I know things can't go back to how they were. Maybe someday we can be friends. Tara, maybe someday we can be friends. The universal closing line of people who want to feel better about themselves without actually changing anything. Sure, Tara, maybe someday when I've undergone a full lobotomy and forgotten what boundaries are, we can grab coffee and pretend you didn't spend a decade treating me like a houseplant that occasionally needed watering. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in its envelope, and walked over to my dresser. I opened the bottom drawer, the one where I'd been throwing random stuff I didn't know what to do with, and tucked the letter inside. Not to keep it forever, not to frame it as some kind of trophy. Just to remind myself why peace tastes better than pizza. Why a quiet apartment full of someone else's throw pillows was better than a house full of people who didn't see me. Physical evidence that I'd made the right choice. My phone buzzed. Text from June. Made too many muffins. Again. Come save me from myself. I smiled. Over the past 2 weeks, June had developed this habit of accidentally making extra muffins and texting me to come get them. Yesterday, it was blueberry. Tuesday was chocolate chip. Today, according to her follow-up text, was lemon poppy seed. I didn't correct her about the accidents. I didn't point out that she was clearly doing this on purpose. Some things you just let happen because they're nice and you deserve nice things. I grabbed my jacket and headed down to the coffee shop. The evening air was crisp, and Main Street was doing that small-town thing where everyone seemed to know each other. Mrs. Patterson was outside with her corgi, chatting with the guy who owned the hardware store. A couple of college kids were sitting on a bench sharing earbuds and laughing about something on someone's phone. Normal life. Simple life. June's shop was nearly empty when I walked in. Just one guy in the corner working on a laptop and a teenage girl studying with highlighters spread across her table like she was preparing for war. Your timing is impeccable, June said, pulling a basket of muffins from the back. These are still warm. What a coincidence, I said, playing along. Me? Showing up right when you have extra muffins. What are the odds? Astronomical, she said, grinning. Must be fate. Must be. She poured me a coffee without asking. She'd learned my order by day 3, which was either attentive or slightly concerning, and slid a plate with a muffin across the counter. So, she said, leaning on the counter in that way that suggested she was settling in for conversation. You looked pretty serious when you walked in. Everything okay? Got a letter from my ex-wife, I said. 3 pages of almost apologies and creative blame shifting. The classic, I'm sorry you feel that way genre of correspondence. Exactly that. She told me I was too independent, and that's why she didn't know how to show up for me. June raised her eyebrows. That's wow. That's a take. Right? Like my ability to function as an adult was somehow a personal attack on her capacity to care. Did you write back? Nope. Filed it away in my drawer of reasons I made good decisions and came here for muffins instead. Smart man, June said. She grabbed a muffin for herself and took a bite. You know what I did when my ex tried to give me the maybe we can be friends speech? What? I told him sure. We can be friends the same way I'm friends with my dentist. I'll see him twice a year. It'll be mildly uncomfortable, and I'll leave feeling like I need to take better care of myself. I laughed so hard I almost choked on my muffin. That's perfect. He didn't think so. But then again, he also thought leaving me for his CrossFit instructor was a journey of self-discovery. So his judgment was questionable. We sat there for a while, eating muffins and trading stories about terrible exes and bad decisions and the weird freedom that comes from starting over. The teenage girl eventually packed up her highlighters and left. The laptop guy ordered another coffee and settled in for what looked like a long night. You seem different than when you first came in here, June said eventually. Lighter, maybe? I feel lighter, I admitted. Like I've been carrying a backpack full of rocks and finally figured out I could just put it down. Good, she said. You deserve to travel light. I finished my muffin, drained my coffee, and stood to leave. Thanks for the accident muffins. Anytime, she said. Same time tomorrow? I'm thinking banana nut. What a coincidence. That's my favorite. Fate, she said, smiling. Must be. Small wins. 6 months later, my 35th birthday rolled around, and I woke up to the smell of something actually baking. June had borrowed my apartment key. We'd been dating for 3 months, taking it slow, and made me a real cake. No plastic wrap. No frozen crust. Just honest-to-God vanilla cake with chocolate frosting. My coworkers at the tutoring center sang off-key during lunch break, and Maya gave me a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest teacher." Perfect. That evening, a small package arrived with no return address. Inside, a framed photo of Tara and me from happier days, back when we still smiled like we meant it. The note said, "I didn't know what you were carrying. I do now. I'm sorry." I didn't reply, didn't throw it away either. Just set it in that drawer with her letter, artifacts from a life I'd outgrown. Later, June and I sat on my couch eating leftover cake, and I raised my glass. Happy birthday, Miles. You finally celebrated you. Somewhere between laughter and buttercream frosting, I realized I wasn't the husband who got frozen pizza anymore. I was the man who learned to leave the oven on for himself.